Hey guys, welcome back to my new channel. Today we will see what if Harry Potter story. If you like the video, please leave like, share and subscribe with and share with your friend. Now let's start the video.
Chapter 1, The tablet in the attic. The cupboard door rattled on its hinges. Get up. Now. Harry Potter opened his eyes to absolute darkness. For a moment, just a fraction of a heartbeat, he didn't know where he was. Then the familiar smell of dust and cleaning supplies filled his nose, and the thin mattress beneath him registered against his spine, and reality crashed back in like cold water. The cupboard. Privet Drive. Another day. I won't tell you again. Aunt Petunia's voice could have cut glass. Her fist struck the door once more, and Harry heard the old wood groan in protest. I'm up, he called back, already swinging his legs over the side of the cot. His feet hit the cold floor, and he fumbled in the darkness for his glasses. The wire frames were bent, Dudley had stepped on them last week, and one lens had a crack running through it that split the world into fractured pieces. He didn't bother asking for new ones. He'd learned that lesson years ago. The lock clicked open from outside, and Harry pushed the door, blinking against the sudden assault of morning light streaming through the kitchen windows. Aunt Petunia stood in the hallway, her horsey face pinched with familiar displeasure. She wore a floral apron over her dress, and her bony hands were already pulling him toward the kitchen before he'd fully emerged. Breakfast won't cook itself, she snapped. And don't you dare burn the bacon again. Dudley's had such a hard week, the least you can do is give him a proper meal. Harry didn't point out that Dudley's hard week consisted of receiving 37 birthday presents instead of the 38 he'd wanted. He didn't mention that one of those presents had been a new racing bike that Dudley had already crashed into old Mrs. Fig's fence. He simply nodded and made his way to the stove. The kitchen was a disaster zone. Wrapping paper still littered the corners where it had drifted, and the remains of Dudley's birthday cake sat on the counter, its surface carved up like a battlefield. Empty sweet wrappers formed a trail from the table to the living room, and someone had spilled fizzy drink on the floor without bothering to clean it up. Harry knew who'd be cleaning it. The same person who always cleaned it. He pulled the frying pan from its hook and set it on the burner, then retrieved the bacon from the refrigerator. The familiar motions soothed him somehow, cracked the eggs, lay the bacon, watched the heat. In the kitchen, at least, he had control over something. The bacon would cook or burn based on his attention. The eggs would scramble or stay runny based on his hand. Small victories, but he'd learned to treasure them. Uncle Vernon's thunderous footsteps announced his descent from the bedroom. The man appeared in the kitchen doorway like a walrus squeezing through an undersized hole, his mustache bristling with the particular irritation he reserved for Harry's existence. You, he grunted, not bothering with a name. After breakfast, you're cleaning the attic. Harry's spatula paused mid-flip. The attic? Did I stutter, boy? Vernon's face was already reddening. Petunia's been after me for months to clear it out. Dudley needs the space for his new computer equipment. You'll sort through everything, throw out what's rubbish, and organize what isn't. Should take you most of the day. Keep you out of trouble. The attic. Harry had never been allowed in the attic before. It was one of the few spaces in the house that remained mysterious to him, sealed off behind a pull-down ladder that Vernon had always claimed was too dangerous for Harry to climb. Yes, Uncle Vernon, Harry said automatically, returning his attention to the bacon before it could burn. But something stirred in his chest, not quite hope, because hope was dangerous, but something close to curiosity. What was in the attic that they'd never wanted him to see? Dudley waddled into the kitchen 20 minutes later, his piggy eyes immediately scanning for food. He'd grown even larger over the past year, to the point where Aunt Petunia had been forced to special order his school uniform from a shop that catered to husky boys. She called it healthy growth. The school nurse had called it something else entirely, and that had resulted in a very loud phone call and a formal complaint. Where's my breakfast? Dudley demanded, dropping into his reinforced chair with a grunt. Harry set the plate before him without a word. 4 rashers of bacon, 3 eggs, 2 sausages, a pile of toast with butter, and a glass of orange juice. Dudley's standard. Harry's own breakfast, if he got one, would be whatever scraps remained after Dudley had finished. Usually a single piece of toast, barely buttered. About time. Dudley didn't look at Harry. He never looked at Harry if he could help it. Harry was furniture to him, something that existed to serve a purpose and disappear when not needed. "What's wrong with your face?" "Nothing," Harry said. "You look weird." "Weirder than usual." Dudley shoved half a sausage into his mouth, chewing with his lips open. "Like you're thinking about something." "I'm always thinking about something." "No, you're not. You're too stupid to think." Dudley laughed at his own joke, spraying bits of sausage across the table. "Dad says thinking's for people who matter." "You don't matter." Harry didn't respond. He'd stopped responding to Dudley's provocations years ago. It never helped. If he stayed quiet, Dudley grew bored. If he talked back, Dudley told Vernon, and Vernon's punishments were creative in their cruelty. "Boy!" Vernon's voice echoed from the hallway. "Get the ladder down. I want you started before the post arrives." Harry moved toward the stairs before his uncle could find another reason to shout. The pull-down ladder was at the end of the upstairs hallway, its cord dangling just low enough for Harry to reach if he jumped. He pulled, and the old hinges groaned in protest as the ladder unfolded. A breath of stale air washed over him, carrying the scent of old cardboard and forgotten time. The attic was dark, the single window at its far end covered by decades of grime. Harry climbed carefully, testing each rung before putting his weight on it. His head emerged into the gloom, and he pulled himself fully into the space. The attic was larger than he'd expected. It ran the full length of the house, its ceiling sloped and crossed with exposed beams. Boxes were stacked everywhere, some labeled in Aunt Petunia's precise handwriting, others unmarked and mysterious. Old furniture lurked beneath dust sheets like sleeping ghosts. A broken rocking chair. A mirror with a cracked face. A dress form missing its arm. Harry stood slowly, careful not to bump his head on the low beams. Dust swirled in the dim light filtering through the grimy window, dancing like tiny spirits before settling back into stillness. "Right," he muttered to himself. "Where do I even start?" He started with the boxes nearest the ladder, the ones Petunia had labeled. Christmas decorations, 1985. Dudley's baby clothes, save for grandchildren. Kitchen items, possibly broken. Each box he opened, sorted, and set aside. The work was tedious but not difficult, and it kept his hands busy while his mind wandered. He'd turned 11 tomorrow. Not that anyone cared. Birthdays in the Dursley household were Dudley's domain, celebrated with excess and fanfare. Harry's birthdays passed unremarked, just another day of chores and silence. He'd stopped expecting anything different years ago. But still. 11. It felt significant somehow, though he couldn't say why. Like standing on the edge of something, waiting for a door to open. He shook the thought away and reached for another box. 2 hours passed. 3. Harry worked methodically through the labeled boxes, creating separate piles for trash, donation, and keeping. Aunt Petunia would probably ignore his organization entirely and make him redo it, but at least he was trying. It was nearly noon when he reached the back corner of the attic. Here, the boxes weren't labeled. They were older, too, their cardboard soft and yellowed with age, their tape peeling away. Harry pried one open and found photographs. Old ones, black and white, showing people he didn't recognize. Men in military uniforms. Women in dresses that looked like something from a history book. A baby wrapped in a white blanket, face scrunched in displeasure. Harry held the photo up to the light, squinting at the writing on the back. Vernon, age 3 months. Our little soldier. He put the photo back and moved to the next box. More photographs, more strangers. These weren't his people. His history was missing, erased, reduced to a single sentence Aunt Petunia had once let slip: your parents died in a car crash. That's all you need to know. But there had to be more. There was always more. Harry had learned that from the library books he read when no one was watching, stories of orphans who discovered they were princes, of lost children who found their way home. Fairy tales, his teachers called them. Nonsense for people who couldn't face reality. Harry thought reality was the nonsense. The real world couldn't be this gray, this empty, this crushingly ordinary. There had to be something else. He pushed deeper into the corner, moving boxes aside to reach the ones buried behind them. His elbow knocked against something that didn't feel like cardboard, something hard, something cold, something that shifted when he touched it. Harry froze. Then, slowly, he moved the last box aside. Behind it, wedged into the corner where two sloped walls met, was a stone tablet about the size of a dinner plate. It was roughly rectangular, its edges worn smooth by what looked like centuries of handling. Its surface was covered in symbols Harry didn't recognize, not letters exactly, but something older, something that seemed to twist and shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. Harry's breath caught in his throat. The symbols were glowing. Faintly, barely visible in the attic's gloom, but definitely glowing, a soft silver light that pulsed like a heartbeat. He reached out before he could stop himself. The moment his fingers touched the stone, the glow intensified. The symbols blazed silver white, so bright Harry had to squint, and he felt something, a presence, vast and ancient, pressing against the edges of his mind. Voices, he realized. For voices, speaking in a language he didn't know but somehow understood. Finally. The heir. The heir has come. 1,000 years, and finally, patience. He's not ready yet. But soon. Soon. Harry yanked his hand back, and the glow faded. The voices vanished. The tablet sat innocently in its corner, looking like nothing more than old stone. His heart was hammering against his ribs. His hand was shaking. What had just happened? What had he touched? Boy! Vernon's voice bellowed from below. Lunch! Get down here! Harry jumped, nearly hitting his head on a beam. He looked at the tablet, then at the ladder, then at the tablet again. Every instinct screamed at him to leave it alone, to pretend he'd never found it, to go back to his safe and predictable misery. But the voices had called him heir. No one had ever called him anything but boy, freak, burden. Harry grabbed the tablet, tucked it under his shirt, and climbed down the ladder. Lunch was a single sandwich with thin slices of ham and no cheese. Harry ate it in the kitchen while Dudley demolished 3 sandwiches, a bag of crisps, and 2 chocolate biscuits in the living room. Through the doorway, Harry could see the television playing some cartoon, its colors garish and loud. The tablet pressed against his stomach, hidden beneath his shirt. It was warm, not unpleasantly so, but noticeably, like a living thing. He could feel those symbols even through the fabric, could sense them pulsing with that same slow heartbeat rhythm. What are you? He thought at it, not expecting an answer. The warmth intensified for just a moment. Not words, exactly, but an impression: patience, waiting, soon. Stop daydreaming and finish your chores. Aunt Petunia appeared in the doorway, her lips pressed into their usual thin line. The attic won't clean itself. Yes, Aunt Petunia. He spent the rest of the afternoon in the attic, but his attention kept drifting to the weight beneath his shirt. He moved boxes mechanically, sorted trash mechanically, created piles mechanically. His body worked while his mind circled around the mystery he'd found. The symbols had been old. Older than anything he'd seen, older than the Roman coins in his history textbook, older than the runic inscriptions in the library's encyclopedia. And they'd responded to his touch specifically. Would they glow for Dudley? For Vernon? Harry doubted it somehow. The heir has come. Heir to what? He didn't get answers that day. The tablet remained warm and silent against his skin, and the afternoon passed into evening without revelation. Harry finished his work in the attic, climbed down the ladder, and made dinner for the Dursleys, roast chicken with vegetables, because Dudley had demanded it. "The attic's done," he reported when Vernon lowered his newspaper. "Already?" Vernon's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You'd better not have just shoved everything into corners." "I'll check tomorrow. I organized it properly. There are piles for, I don't care about your piles. Just make sure it's done right." Vernon returned to his newspaper, effectively dismissing Harry from existence. Harry retreated to his cupboard without being told. The door locked behind him, it always locked behind him, from the outside, and he was alone in the darkness with his thoughts and the mysterious weight beneath his shirt. He pulled out the tablet and held it in his hands. In the cupboard's absolute blackness, the glow was more visible. The symbols pulsed with that slow heartbeat rhythm, casting strange shadows on the walls. Harry traced one symbol with his finger, a spiraling shape that might have been a serpent, and felt a whisper at the edge of his hearing. "Patience, young one. The time is not yet right." "When?" Harry whispered back. He felt foolish talking to a rock, but something told him the rock was listening. "Tomorrow. When the sun sets on your 11th year and rises on something new. Tomorrow." The warmth faded. The glow dimmed. Harry was left holding cold stone in a dark cupboard, wondering if he'd imagined the entire thing. But he hadn't imagined it. He knew he hadn't. Something was going to happen tomorrow. Something that would change everything. Harry tucked the tablet beneath his thin pillow and laid his head down, staring at the ceiling he couldn't see. For the first time in as long as he could remember, he fell asleep with something other than dread in his heart. He fell asleep with anticipation. July 31st arrived gray and drizzling. Harry woke to the sound of rain against the window, not his window, because cupboards didn't have windows, but the kitchen window at the end of the hall. He could hear it through the thin walls, a steady pattering that matched the rhythm still pulsing from the tablet beneath his pillow. 11. He was 11 years old today. For a moment, he let himself feel it. The significance of another year survived, another year of dodging Dudley's fists and Vernon's rages and Petunia's cold dismissals. 11 years of meals that were never quite enough, of clothes that never quite fit, of a cupboard that was never quite home. But today felt different. Today, the tablet was warm against his palm when he reached for it. Today, the symbols seemed to glow brighter, even in the dim light leaking through the crack beneath his door. Soon, the presence whispered. "Tonight. Harry. Get up." He hid the tablet in his pillowcase and pushed open the cupboard door. Aunt Petunia stood in the hallway, her face arranged in the peculiar expression she wore when she was about to deliver bad news she considered good news. "We're going out," she announced. "Mrs. Fig has agreed to watch you for the day." Harry's heart sank. Mrs. Fig was a batty old woman who smelled like cabbage and cats. Her house was filled with photographs of cats, figurines of cats, cushions embroidered with cats. She made Harry look at every single one while she complained about her various medical ailments. "Can't I stay here?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Absolutely not." Petunia's tone permitted no argument. "Marge is visiting, and she doesn't need to be reminded of your existence." Aunt Marge. Vernon's sister, a woman who bred bulldogs and looked rather like one herself. She hated Harry with a passion that even exceeded Vernon's, and she never missed an opportunity to tell him exactly how worthless his parents had been. Maybe Mrs. Figgs wasn't so bad after all. "I'll get my shoes," Harry said. He spent the next hour at Mrs. Figgs, nodding politely at cat pictures while his mind circled around the tablet hidden in his cupboard. What if the Dursleys found it while he was gone? What if they threw it away? What if the moment he'd been waiting for happened while he was trapped in a house that smelled like cabbage? "Patience," something whispered in the back of his mind. "I waited 1,000 years. You can wait a few hours. The voice sounded amused. Harry didn't know how a voice could sound amused without actually laughing, but this one managed it. The hours crawled by. Mrs. Fig served stale biscuits and lukewarm tea. The rain continued to fall. Harry watched the grey sky through grimy windows and counted the minutes until he could return home. It was nearly dark when the Dursleys' car pulled into Mrs. Fig's drive. Harry said a hasty goodbye and practically ran to the vehicle, sliding into the back seat before anyone could object. Dudley was already there, looking green around the edges. Apparently Aunt Marge had pinched his cheeks one too many times. "Straight to bed when we get home," Vernon announced, eyeing Harry in the rearview mirror. "No dinner. I don't want to hear a peep from you." "Yes, Uncle Vernon. No dinner. On his birthday." Harry felt the familiar emptiness in his stomach, the hollow ache that had been his companion for as long as he could remember. But tonight, somehow, it didn't hurt as much. Tonight, something was going to happen. The tablet was still there when he checked. Still warm. Still pulsing. Harry lay on his cot as the house settled into nighttime silence. He heard Vernon's snores beginning, heard Dudley's television finally switch off, heard Petunia's footsteps fade as she retired to bed. The clock in the hallway ticked toward midnight. 11:58, 11:59. The tablet began to glow. Harry sat up, pulling it from beneath his pillow. The symbols blazed silver white, brighter than before, bright enough to illuminate every corner of his cupboard. The voices returned, 4 of them, overlapping and distinct, speaking words he didn't understand but somehow knew. "The hour is come. The heir awakens. 1,000 years of waiting, and finally, we can return." "Return?" Harry whispered. "Return from where?" The tablet cracked. Not broke, cracked, a single line running through its center that widened as Harry watched. Light poured from the crack, silver white and blazing, filling the cupboard until Harry had to shield his eyes. And then the voices spoke words he understood perfectly. "Harry Potter. Heir of the Pact. You have called us, and we have answered." The tablet shattered. Pieces of stone flew outward, but they didn't hit Harry. They hung suspended in the air, orbiting around a central point of blinding light. The light expanded, took shape, became 4 distinct forms that pressed against the cupboard's walls. Harry scrambled backward until his spine hit the door. His heart hammered in his chest. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. But it was happening. It was real. The light faded. The stone fragments fell. And 4 people stood in Harry's cupboard, as solid and present as the cot beneath him. The first was a tall man with wild red hair and a beard to match, broad-shouldered and powerfully built. He wore strange clothes, a tunic of deep crimson crossed with leather straps, boots that looked like they belonged to a medieval soldier, and a cloak that seemed to shimmer between red and gold. His eyes, brown and fierce, swept the cupboard with growing fury. The second was a thinner man, dark-haired and pale, with features sharp enough to cut. His robes were green and silver, elegant and precise, and his grey eyes held a coldness that made Harry shrink back against the door. But that coldness wasn't directed at Harry, it was directed at the cupboard itself, at the tiny space where a child had been forced to live. The third was a woman with flowing black hair and blue eyes that seemed to see through everything. She wore robes of deep blue embroidered with bronze, and her expression was thoughtful, analytical, cataloguing everything around her with frightening precision. The fourth was another woman, shorter than the others, with kind brown eyes and honey-colored hair pulled back in a practical braid. She wore robes of yellow and black, simpler than the others, and her face held an expression that Harry didn't recognize at first. Warmth. Concern. Compassion. Motherly, his mind supplied, though he had no reference point for the word. For a long moment, no one spoke. The 4 strangers stared at Harry. Harry stared back, his mouth open, his glasses askew, his heart threatening to burst from his chest. Then the red-haired man spoke. By Merlin's bloody beard, he said, his voice deep and rich with barely contained rage. Is this a cupboard? Godric, the dark-haired woman said quietly. Don't Godric me, Rowena. The boy, the heir, is living in a cupboard. The man, Godric, kicked the door behind Harry, and it exploded outward, torn from its hinges. Light from the hallway spilled in, and Harry saw the strangers properly for the first time. They were real. Solid. Present. And they were furious. Explain, the pale man said, and his voice was like ice. Explain who has done this to you, child. Harry opened his mouth, but no words came out. Give him space, Salazar. The honey-haired woman stepped forward, crouching so she was at Harry's eye level. Up close, her face was even kinder, her expression radiating warmth like a hearth fire. Hello, little one. You have nothing to fear from us. Can you tell us your name? Harry, he managed. Harry Potter. The four strangers exchanged glances. The dark-haired woman, Rowena, drew in a sharp breath. The pale man, Salazar, went very still. Godric's fury somehow intensified. And the kind woman's eyes filled with tears. Potter, Godric repeated. Then it's true. The line survived. More than survived, Rowena murmured. She was studying Harry with those piercing blue eyes, seeing things Harry couldn't imagine. The prophecy. Salazar, do you feel it? He's marked. Marked by something dark and something light. I feel it. Salazar's voice was neutral, but his eyes had narrowed. The question is who marked him. And why he's living in a cupboard in a Muggle household instead of being raised as befits his station. Questions can wait. The kind woman reached out, and her hand touched Harry's cheek, the first gentle touch he could remember receiving. Her skin was warm, her fingers calloused from work. You're hungry. And tired. And you've been alone too long. Her voice cracked on the last word. Far, far too long. Who are you? Harry whispered. How did you come out of the stone? What's happening? The four strangers looked at each other again. Some silent communication passed between them, an understanding forged by years, no, centuries, of partnership. Then Godric stepped forward and knelt beside the kind woman, his massive frame somehow fitting in the cupboard's narrow space. His eyes met Harry's, and Harry saw the fury there, but also something else. Recognition. Wonder. Hope. We're your legacy, lad, Godric said. We built Hogwarts 1,000 years ago, and we bound ourselves to a pact that would bring us back if the world ever needed us again. He smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. I'm Godric Gryffindor. This is Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and the grumpy bastard in the corner is Salazar Slytherin. The word should have been meaningless. Godric Gryffindor. Helga Hufflepuff. Rowena Ravenclaw. Salazar Slytherin. Names from a fairy tale, from a story Harry had never heard. But something in Harry's blood recognized them anyway. The founders of Hogwarts, Harry breathed, and he didn't know how he knew the name, didn't know how he knew what it meant, but he knew it was true. You're the founders of Hogwarts. We are, Helga said softly. And you, Harry Potter, are the reason we've returned. The heir of the pact, Rowena added. Prophesied before we ever laid the first stone. Someone destined for great things, Salazar said, and his cold eyes held Harry's gaze without blinking. Someone who should not be living in a cupboard. Harry's head was spinning. This was too much. Too fast. Too impossible. But Helga's hand was still on his cheek, warm and gentle. Godric's smile was still present, fierce and welcoming. Rowena's eyes saw everything, and Salazar's cold fury was directed at the cupboard, not at Harry. They were real. They were here. And they were angry, not at him, but for him. What happens now? Harry asked. Godric's smile widened into something dangerous. Now, he said, drawing a sword that hadn't been there a moment before, a blade that materialized from pure golden light and solidified into gleaming steel, we find out who did this to you. And we make them regret it. Harry stared at the sword. He stared at the 4 founders of Hogwarts, standing in his broken cupboard like avenging angels. He stared at a world that had suddenly become impossible and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Right, he said, because he couldn't think of anything else to say. Okay. And somewhere in the depths of Hogwarts Castle, far to the north, an ancient presence stirred in its prison. It felt the founders return like a knife in its back. It felt the heirs awakening like a threat to everything it had planned. And it smiled. Because the game had finally begun. The hallway clock ticked past midnight. Harry Potter was officially 11 years old. He was standing in the ruins of his cupboard with 4 legendary wizards, and a woman he'd never met was making him soup. Sit, Helga Hufflepuff commanded, pointing to the kitchen table. She'd already commandeered the stove, igniting the burner with a wave of her hand and levitating pots and pans from their hooks. You need food before anything else. The conversation can wait. The conversation cannot wait, Salazar argued, but he was studying the kitchen with an expression of mixed fascination and disgust. He picked up the television remote like it might bite him, turning it over in his long fingers. What manner of artifice is this? Later, Salazar. Rowena had taken up position by the window, her eyes fixed on something Harry couldn't see. I'm reading the wards around this house. They're complex. Unusual. Wards. Harry sat at the table because Helga had told him to, and something about her tone brooked no argument. What wards? Blood protection, Rowena murmured. Anchored through familial connection. Remarkably strong, but also remarkably narrow. These wards protect you from a specific threat, Harry, not all threats. She turned from the window, her expression troubled. Someone very powerful established these protections. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And someone who clearly didn't care about what happened to you inside the protection. Godric paced the kitchen like a caged lion, his boots heavy on the tile floor. Blood wards. Couldn't they have at least ensured you'd be treated well? They could have, Salazar said quietly. They chose not to. That tells us something about their priorities. Wait. Harry held up a hand. I don't understand any of this. Blood wards. Protection from specific threats. What threat? Why would someone eat first? Helga placed a bowl of soup in front of him, rich and golden, filled with vegetables and chunks of chicken. It smelled better than anything Harry had ever encountered. Your body needs nourishment. Your mind needs rest. We've waited 1,000 years, we can wait another hour for answers. Harry looked at the soup, then at Helga's kind face, then at the 3 other founders who had taken up positions around the kitchen like sentinels. Godric by the door, watching for threats. Salazar by the window now, examining the street outside. Rowena tracing invisible patterns in the air, muttering calculations under her breath. None of them seemed inclined to hurt him. None of them looked at him with the disgust he was used to seeing in the Dursleys' eyes. Harry picked up the spoon and took a bite. The soup was perfect. Hot without burning, savory without being heavy, nourishing in a way that seemed to reach past his stomach to warm something deeper. Harry ate without stopping, barely breathing, shoveling food into his mouth like it might disappear at any moment. Slowly, Helga said gently. It's not going anywhere. Harry forced himself to slow down. When was the last time he'd eaten properly? The sandwich at lunch had been hours ago, and he'd been sent to bed without dinner. Before that, he couldn't remember a meal that actually satisfied him. When you've finished, Rowena said, we'll need you to tell us everything. How you came to be here. Who placed you with these people? What you know of your parents and your history. I don't know much, Harry admitted between bites. My aunt, that's Petunia, she's my mother's sister, she never talks about my parents. She just says they died in a car crash and that I'm lucky they took me in. The temperature in the kitchen dropped several degrees. A car crash, Salazar repeated, and his voice could have frozen the Thames. She told you your parents died in a car crash. Is that not what happened? The four founders exchanged glances. Some silent conversation occurred, a debate happening in shared looks and subtle gestures. Finally, Godric sighed and pulled out a chair, sitting across from Harry with an expression that was equal parts sorrow and determination. Your parents didn't die in a car crash, lad. They were murdered. Harry's spoon clattered against the bowl. Murdered. By a dark wizard named Voldemort, though he wasn't the first and won't be the last to bear that kind of evil. Godric's voice was measured, careful, like he was handling something fragile. Your father, James Potter, was a descendant of my line. Your mother, Lily, was remarkable. When Voldemort came for them, they died protecting you. Protecting me? Harry's voice was barely a whisper. From what? From him. From the curse he tried to cast on you, the killing curse, which should have ended your life. Godric reached across the table and gently brushed Harry's hair aside, revealing the lightning bolt scar on his forehead. This is where it struck you. And this is why you survived. Harry touched his scar with trembling fingers. He'd always had it, for as long as he could remember. Aunt Petunia said it was from the car crash, from flying glass. Just another lie. How? He asked. How did I survive? That's what we need to figure out. Rowena had moved closer, her blue eyes fixed on the scar with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. The killing curse cannot be blocked. Cannot be survived. And yet you did. The magical signature I'm reading from that mark is unprecedented. Your mother's sacrifice created the protection we were discussing earlier, Helga added softly. Love, freely given, willingly sacrificed. The oldest magic there is, and the most powerful. She died so you could live, Harry. Never doubt that. Harry's eyes were burning. He hadn't cried in years, crying at the Dursleys only made things worse, but now, hearing about parents who had loved him enough to die for him. Why didn't anyone tell me? He choked out. Why did they lie? Because the truth is dangerous. Salazar's voice was cold, but not unkind. Because knowing what you are, who you are, would have painted a target on your back before you were ready to bear it. Who I am. What am I? You're Harry Potter. Godric smiled, but it was a fierce thing, proud and determined. The boy who lived. The only person ever to survive the killing curse. You're famous in our world, lad. Famous and hunted and essential. There are those who would worship you and those who would destroy you. And that, Salazar said quietly, is why someone hid you here. In a Muggle household, under blood wards, with people who clearly despised magic. It's a clever strategy, I'll grant. No one would think to look for the savior of the wizarding world in a cupboard under the stairs. Clever. Helga's voice was flat with fury. Is that what we're calling it? Abandoning a child to abuse and neglect? I didn't say I approved, woman. I said it was clever. Enough. Rowena's command cut through the rising tension. We can debate the ethics of past decisions later. Right now, we need to focus on what comes next. She turned to Harry. Tomorrow, or rather, today, since it's past midnight, you were supposed to receive a letter. An invitation to attend Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. That invitation is still coming. The question is how we handle it. Hogwarts. Harry tested the word. The school you built. 1,000 years ago, give or take. Godric grinned, some of his earlier fury fading into enthusiasm. Best years of our lives, building that castle. Fought every step of the way, of course. Salazar and I nearly killed each other twice, and Rowena rewrote my ward designs so many times I stopped counting, but we built something that mattered. Something that would last. Something that has apparently decayed in our absence. Salazar's lip curled. I can feel it from here. The magic is corrupted. The foundations are weakening. Whatever has happened in the past millennium, Hogwarts has not been properly maintained. We'll deal with that, Rowena said. But first, we deal with the immediate situation. Harry needs to be removed from this household. Permanently. Agreed. Helga was already moving, opening cupboards and examining their contents with methodical precision. I'll need to gather some supplies. Healing potions won't brew themselves, and this child has been starved and neglected for long enough. I can help with the removal. Godric's hand dropped to his sword. Just point me at whoever made the decision to put him here. Violence later. Rowena held up a hand. First, we learn who we're dealing with. The wards around this house bear a specific magical signature, someone I'd very much like to have a conversation with before any swords are drawn. Harry sat at the table, bowl of soup cooling in front of him, and tried to process everything he was hearing. Murdered parents. A dark wizard. Blood wards. A school of magic. And 4 legendary figures standing in his aunt's kitchen, arguing about how best to rescue him from his own life. Why me? He asked quietly. The founders paused, turning to look at him. Why did you come back for me? You said you waited 1,000 years. What's so special about me? Helga moved first, crossing to the table and sitting beside him. Her hand found his, warm and steady. Because you're the heir, Harry. Not by blood alone, though your bloodline matters, but by circumstance, by prophecy, by fate. When we created the pact that would resurrect us, we bound it to a specific set of conditions. The heir would be an orphan. The heir would be mistreated by those who should have cared for him. The heir would have the potential to either save the magical world or destroy it. That's reassuring, Harry muttered. It's not about what you might destroy. Helga squeezed his hand. It's about what you might build. The magical world is broken, Harry. We've been gone for 1,000 years, and in that time, everything we worked for has been corrupted. The old prejudices we fought against have become entrenched. The unity we tried to create has shattered into factionalism. And dark forces we thought defeated are stirring again. Voldemort wasn't the first, Salazar said, and he won't be the last. There are things in this world far older and far more dangerous than a jumped-up half-blood with delusions of grandeur. Things we imprisoned long ago, things that are waking now that were no longer there to maintain the wards. That's actually reassuring. Harry's voice cracked slightly. No. Godric laughed, a booming sound that seemed to fill the kitchen. No, it's bloody terrifying. But you won't face it alone. That's the whole point, lad. We're back. We're here. And we're not going anywhere. Not until Hogwarts is restored, Rowena added. Not until the old evils are dealt with, Salazar contributed. Not until you're safe and strong and ready to choose your own path. Helga smiled at Harry, and it was like watching the sun rise. That's our promise to you, Harry Potter. We came back for you, and we're not leaving. Harry looked at her. At all of them. These impossible people who had emerged from a stone tablet in his cupboard, who spoke of magic and murder and destiny like they were discussing the weather. I don't understand most of what you're telling me, he admitted. I don't know what any of this means. I don't even know if I can do magic. Oh, you can. Salazar's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. The tablet wouldn't have responded to someone without power. You've done accidental magic before, I'd wager. Strange things happening around you. Things you couldn't explain. Harry thought of the time he'd ended up on the school roof while running from Dudley. The time Aunt Petunia's favorite vase had shattered when she was screaming at him. The time his hair had grown back overnight after a particularly brutal cut. Yes, he said slowly. Things have happened. Strange things. That's your magic responding to your emotions. Rowena's eyes gleamed with intellectual interest. Untrained, uncontrolled, but present. With proper instruction, you'll learn to harness it. To shape it. To become something remarkable. If you choose to, Helga added quickly. This isn't conscription, Harry. We're offering you a path, not forcing you down it. Whatever happens next is your decision. Harry looked at his empty soup bowl. At his hands, still trembling slightly. At the ruined cupboard visible through the kitchen doorway. What choice did he have, really? Stay here, in a house where he was hated, where he was starved and mocked and imprisoned? Return to a life of cleaning and cooking and silent despair? Or go with these strange, impossible people? Learn magic. Discover who he really was. Find out why his parents had died and who had killed them. I want to learn, Harry said. I want to know everything. Godric's grin could have lit up the night sky. Then you will, he promised. Starting right now. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Helga set up a small brewing station on the kitchen counter, producing ingredients from pouches that seemed far too small to contain them. She worked with quiet efficiency, chopping and measuring and stirring, occasionally humming under her breath. Rowena traced complex patterns in the air with her wand, a slender thing of blue-gray wood that she'd drawn from her sleeve, muttering calculations and occasionally making notes on a piece of parchment that appeared from nowhere. Salazar disappeared upstairs. Harry heard doors opening and closing, heard footsteps in places that definitely weren't above the kitchen. When he returned, his expression was carefully blank. 3 bedrooms, he reported. The largest belongs to the adults. The second belongs to a boy roughly Harry's age. The third has been converted into a storage room for broken toys and forgotten gifts. And Harry sleeps in a cupboard. Godric's voice was flat. Harry slept in a cupboard. Past tense. Salazar's gray eyes met Harry's. You'll never sleep in that space again. Where will I sleep? Harry asked. With us, eventually. Helga looked up from her brewing. We'll need to establish a proper residence, but that can wait until we've assessed the broader situation. For tonight, you'll use one of the bedrooms here. Dudley's bedroom? I can't, Dudley. Salazar's lip curled. The boy with his own bedroom and a storage room full of unused gifts, while you slept in a cupboard. He's not so bad, Harry said automatically, then stopped. Why was he defending Dudley? Force of habit, probably. Don't cause trouble. Don't make waves. Survive. But these people weren't the Dursleys. These people had emerged from magic to rescue him. Why was he still acting like he needed to be small? He's terrible, Harry corrected himself. He's fat and mean and he hunts me for sport. Better. Salazar actually smiled, a thin, cold thing, but genuine. The first step to liberation is honesty about your captors. They're not my captors. They're my family. Family doesn't lock children in cupboards. Helga's voice was gentle but firm. Family doesn't starve or neglect or abuse. Whatever these people are to you by blood, they are not your family in any meaningful sense. Harry didn't know how to respond to that. The Dursleys were all he'd ever known. They were horrible, yes, but they were also constant. Predictable. A misery he understood. These founders were unpredictable in every possible way. Someone's coming. Godric moved to the window, peering out into the pre-dawn darkness. Large man. Walking up the path. I sense Hogwarts magic on him. Rowena frowned. He's connected to the school somehow. An employee? At this hour? Delivering what? The doorbell rang, a single, violent chime that probably woke every Dursley in the house. Harry started to move toward the door, automatic response, but Godric held up a hand. "Let me." The founder strode to the front door and yanked it open. The man on the other side was massive, twice as tall as Vernon, 3 times as wide, with a wild beard and kind eyes that went very wide when he saw Godric. "Blimey," the man breathed. You can't be, Godric Gryffindor, at your service." Godric gave a short bow that somehow managed to be both mocking and genuine. "And you are?" "Hagrid. Rubeus Hagrid. Keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts." The giant's eyes swept past Godric to the hallway, where Salazar, Rowena, and Helga had appeared. His face went white. Oh, Merlin's beard. "It's true. Dumbledore sent me to check, but I didn't really believe, the founders. All 4 of ye. The same." Salazar stepped forward, and Harry noticed the giant flinch. "You work for Dumbledore? The current headmaster?" "Tha's right. Greatest wizard of the age, Dumbledore is." Hagrid's voice held a note of fierce loyalty. "He'll want ter see ye. All of ye." And Harry, too, his eyes found Harry behind the founders, and warmth flooded his face. "There ye are. Happy birthday, Harry. I got somethin' for ye." He reached into his enormous coat and produced a slightly squashed box. "Baked it meself. Figured ye might not get many cakes, livin' here in Paul." Harry stepped forward, drawn by the unexpected kindness in the giant's voice. Inside the box was a chocolate cake, lopsided and clumsily decorated, with "Happy Birthday Harry" written in green icing. "You made me a cake." Harry's voice sounded strange to his own ears. "You don't even know me." "I knew your parents." Hagrid's eyes went misty. "Lily and James. Great people. Great friends. I was the one who, well." He stopped, swallowed. "Anyway. Dumbledore wanted me ter deliver your Hogwarts letter personally, seein', as the owls kept gettin' turned back. But it seems like things have changed a bit since yesterday." "You might say that." Godric clapped Hagrid on the shoulder, nearly staggering the giant. "Come in, man. Have some tea. Tell us everything that's happened in the past 1,000 years. I don't really know the past 1,000 years. Just the past few decades, like." "That'll do for a start." The next hour was an education. Hagrid sat at the kitchen table, which groaned under his weight but held, and talked while Helga served tea and Rowena listened with intense focus. He told them about Hogwarts as it stood now, about the 4 houses and the current faculty. He told them about Dumbledore's rise to power, his defeat of Grindelwald, his subsequent position as leader of the Light. He told them about Voldemort's first rise, the terror that had gripped the magical world, and the night at Godric's Hollow when everything had changed. "I was the one who pulled Harry from the rubble," Hagrid said, tears streaming into his beard. "Just a baby, he was. Cryin' in his crib with that scar fresh on his forehead. And Lily and James," he couldn't continue. "You brought him here." Salazar's voice was neutral, but his eyes were sharp. "On Dumbledore's orders." "Tha's right. Dumbledore said the Blood Wards would protect him. Said he'd be safe with his family." "Safe?" Helga's voice dripped with venom. "In a cupboard. Starved. Beaten. Is that your definition of safe?" Hagrid's face crumpled. "I didn't know. Dumbledore said, I didn't know." He turned to Harry, anguish in every line of his face. "I'm so sorry. If I'd known, it's not your fault." Harry surprised himself by meaning it. "You were following orders. Dumbledore's the one who made the decision." "A decision we'll be discussing with him." Godric's sword had rematerialized somewhere during the conversation, resting against the wall within easy reach. "At length." He's a great man, Hagrid protested weakly. He has his reasons for everything, great men often do. Salazar's smile didn't reach his eyes. That doesn't make their reasons good ones. The front room's staircase creaked. Heavy footsteps descended. Vernon Dursley appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face purple with rage. What the bloody hell is going on here? Who are all you people? And what are you doing in my... He stopped. His eyes found Godric. Found the sword. Found the 4 strangers in medieval clothing standing in his kitchen with an apparent giant and his nephew. You, Vernon snarled, focusing on Harry as if the others weren't there. What have you done? What freakishness have you brought into my house? Godric moved. One moment he was by the table. The next he was in front of Vernon, his hand around the man's throat, lifting him off the ground with casual ease. Did you just call my heir a freak? Godric's voice was conversational, almost pleasant. Did you just walk into this room and insult the boy your wife's blood is supposed to protect? Vernon's face went from purple to white. He clawed at Godric's hand, but he might as well have been trying to move a mountain. Godric. Rowena's voice was calm. Put him down. We need information. I can get information while holding him. He can't talk while being choked. Godric considered this, then dropped Vernon unceremoniously to the floor. The man collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. I'm going to ask you questions, Godric said, crouching so his face was level with Vernon's. You're going to answer them truthfully. If you lie, Salazar here will know, he's very good at telling when people lie, and I'll break something. We'll start with fingers and work up. Understand? Vernon nodded frantically. Good. First question, who told you to keep Harry in a cupboard? And no one. There wasn't room, lie. Salazar's voice was bored. Try again. Godric's hand closed around Vernon's left pinky finger. All right. All right. There was a letter. When the boy arrived, there was a letter. A letter from whom? D. Dumbledore. The freak headmaster at that freak school. Godric's grip tightened. The word you're looking for is wizard. Try again. The wizard headmaster. The letter said to keep the boy humble, not to let his fame go to his head, to make sure he didn't grow up thinking he was special. Silence filled the kitchen. Dumbledore, Helga breathed. Dumbledore instructed this? The letter said to treat him normally. Vernon's eyes were wild with fear. It said not to tell him about magic, not to let him think he was better than other children. We were just following instructions. You locked him in a cupboard. Rowena's voice was ice. You starved him. You let your son hunt him like prey. Is that normal treatment? He was always doing strange things, we had to discipline. Godric stood abruptly, leaving Vernon slumped against the wall. I've heard enough. His voice was flat, emptied of its earlier warmth. Salazar, can you modify his memories? To what end? They'll remember that Harry left willingly. They'll remember that we came to collect him for school. They won't remember that we threatened them, or that they revealed Dumbledore's instructions. Godric's jaw was tight. I want Dumbledore to think everything is proceeding according to his plan. At least until we're ready to confront him. Wise. Salazar moved toward Vernon, drawing his wand. And the boy upstairs? The wife? Modify them all. Let them wake up thinking Harry's gone off to some special school for gifted children. They'll be thrilled to be rid of him. Wait. Harry stepped forward. You're going to change their memories. Is that right? The founders paused, looking at him. They abused you, Godric said gently. For years. They deserve far worse than a bit of memory alteration. I know they do. But. Harry struggled to articulate what he was feeling. If you change their memories without asking, without giving them a choice, how is that different from what they did to me? They took away my choices. They decided what I should and shouldn't know. Helga's eyes went soft with pride. Salazar looked almost impressed. Rowena's analytical gaze sharpened with interest. And Godric laughed, a short, surprised burst. By Merlin, lad. You've got more moral clarity at 11 than most adults manage in a lifetime. He shook his head. All right. What would you have us do? Harry thought about it. About the cupboard and the hunger and the bruises. About Dudley's fists and Vernon's belt and Petunia's cold silence. About the letter that had instructed them to keep him humble, to break him, to ensure he arrived at Hogwarts damaged and grateful for any kindness. Tell them the truth, he said finally. Tell them that I know what they did, that I know who told them to do it, and that I'm leaving. Let them live with knowing they were tools for someone else's plan. That seems like worse punishment than forgetting. Salazar's smile this time was genuine. Slytherin thinking, he murmured approvingly. Very well. Vernon Dursley, consider yourself informed. You were a pawn in another man's game, and your cruelty served his purposes more than your own. Your nephew is leaving now, and you will never see him again. Vernon's face went through several complicated emotions, fear, fury, confusion, and finally something that might have been relief. Good riddance, he spat, but his voice was weak. Indeed. Godric turned to Harry. Collect your things, lad. We're leaving. Harry looked around the kitchen where he'd cooked 1,000 meals, where he'd scrubbed 1,000 dishes, where he'd been sent to work and never to eat. I don't have things, he said. Just the clothes on my back. Everything else was Dudley's hand-me-downs. Then we'll get you new things. Helga took his hand. Proper things. Things that are yours. Harry looked at her, at all of them, and felt something shift inside him. Something hard and cold that had lived in his chest for as long as he could remember was beginning to crack. Okay, he said. Let's go. He didn't look back at Vernon. He didn't look back at the cupboard or the kitchen or the house that had never been his home. He just walked out the front door, into the grey light of dawn, with 4 founders of Hogwarts at his side. The sun was rising on his 11th birthday. And for the first time in his life, Harry Potter had a future. They operat. One moment Harry was standing on the front lawn of number 4, Privet Drive, with Hagrid blubbering something about staying in touch and making sure to buy a good cauldron. The next, Helga's hand tightened on his, the world compressed into a tube of screaming color, and then, breathe, lad. Godric's voice came from somewhere above him. The first time's always the worst. Harry was on his knees in grass, real grass, not the manicured lawn of the Dursleys, heaving and trying to remember how lungs worked. The air smelled different here. Cleaner. Wilder. Where, he managed to straighten, pushing his glasses back up his nose. Where are we? Scotland. Rowena was already moving, her wand tracing patterns in the air that left trails of silver light. About 10 miles from Hogwarts. Close enough to sense the school's magic, far enough that Dumbledore won't detect our arrival. We need a base of operations. Salazar had produced a small object from his robes, a crystal sphere that glowed faintly in his palm. Somewhere secure. Somewhere we can plan without being observed. The Potter properties, Helga suggested. If the family line survived, surely their estates did as well. Potentially compromised. Dumbledore has been acting as Harry's magical guardian for a decade. He'll have had access to any family holdings. The Gryffindor vault, then. Godric grinned. No one's had access to that since I died. Because no one knew where it was. Exactly. They were talking over Harry's head, literally and figuratively, debating locations and strategies while he stood in an unfamiliar field, the wind cutting through his thin shirt, his life upended in the space of a single night. Excuse me, he said. They kept talking. Excuse me, he said again, louder. Still talking. Oi. Harry's voice cracked on the shout, but it did the trick. All four founders turned to look at him. I appreciate everything you're doing. Really. But could someone maybe explain what's actually happening? In small words. Because I've just found out magic is real, my parents were murdered by someone named Voldemort. Hagrid had flinched when Harry said the name. The founders didn't. I've been living in a cupboard because some wizard told my aunt to keep me humble, for legendary magical figures just appeared in my cupboard and took me to Scotland, and I still don't actually understand what the plan is. Silence. Then Godric started laughing. Fair point, he admitted. We've been treating you like a package to be moved rather than a person to be informed. Bad habit from the old days, we were always planning campaigns, moving pieces around, and we forgot that the pieces have feelings. Let's start fresh. Helga moved to Harry's side, guiding him to a nearby boulder large enough to serve as a seat. Sit. Ask questions. We'll answer everything we can. Harry sat. The stone was cold through his thin trousers, but he barely noticed. Why did you come back? Because the pact was triggered. Rowena's answer was precise, academic. 1,000 years ago, when we built Hogwarts, we knew we wouldn't live forever. We also knew that the forces we'd fought, the prejudices, the dark magic, the threats to the magical world, wouldn't die with us. So we created a failsafe. A binding that would resurrect us if certain conditions were met. What conditions? An heir would be born. Helga took over, her voice gentler. A child of all four bloodlines, not directly, but through the tangled web of magical ancestry. That child would be orphaned, would be mistreated, would possess the potential for extraordinary power. And that child would find the tablet we left behind. All four bloodlines. The Potters descend from Godric. Salazar's voice was neutral, informative. Your mother, Lily Evans, carried Ravenclaw blood through her maternal line, diluted over centuries, but present. The Peverils, from whom you also descend, intermarried with Hufflepuff's line some 500 years ago. And the Slytherin connection. His lip curled slightly. Comes through your scar. Harry touched the lightning bolt on his forehead. My scar connected me to Slytherin. To Voldemort. Who is a descendant of mine. Salazar's expression was complicated, disgust, perhaps, and something like grief. A twisted, broken branch of my family tree, but connected nonetheless. When he attacked you and failed, when his curse rebounded, a piece of him lodged itself in your scar. That fragment carries my blood. Harry's stomach turned. There's a piece of Voldemort inside me. A small piece. Dormant, mostly. We'll deal with it eventually. Salazar waved a hand dismissively. The point is that you satisfied all the conditions of the pact. You're the heir. Our return is tied to you, to your protection and your training and your eventual destiny. What destiny? The founders exchanged glances. That's not for us to decide, Helga said carefully. The pact brings us back to guide and protect you. What you do with that guidance and protection is your choice. You could save the magical world. You could destroy it. You could walk away from everything and live a quiet life somewhere remote. Could I actually do that? Walk away? No. Godric's voice was honest, almost brutal. You couldn't. It's not in your nature. I can see it already, the fire in your eyes, the way you squared up when you challenged us to explain ourselves. You're a fighter, Harry Potter. You always will be. But the choice is still yours, Rowena added. Even if we know what you'll choose. The distinction matters. Harry absorbed this. It was a lot to absorb, prophecy and destiny and fragments of Dark Lords living in his forehead, but somehow, sitting on a cold rock in a Scottish field with 4 ancient wizards, it felt manageable. Possibly because nothing about this situation was normal enough to be frightening. It was all so strange that his brain had simply stopped trying to process it as reality. "What's next?" he asked. "You said you need a base. You were debating where to go." "The Gryffindor Vault." Godric nodded firmly. "I had holdings separate from Hogwarts, a manor, a vault of artifacts, libraries. If they're still intact, they'll provide shelter and resources. If they've been discovered and plundered, well, we'll deal with that when we arrive. And then? Then we assess. Hogwarts. The Ministry. The current state of magical Britain." Rowena's eyes were distant, calculating. "We determine who our allies are and who our enemies are. We make plans. And we train you." Helga smiled. "You have 10 years of magical education to catch up on, Harry. It's going to be an intensive summer." "I thought Hogwarts started in September." "It does." Salazar's smile was cold and sharp. "But you won't be attending as a normal first year. The heir of the Founders Pact doesn't sit in classrooms learning to turn matchsticks into needles. You'll have private instruction from the four of us, and your public Hogwarts career will be different." "Different how?" "We haven't decided yet." Godric shrugged. "That depends on what we find when we get there. Dumbledore's involvement complicates things. He clearly has plans for you, has had plans for you since the night your parents died. We need to understand those plans before we can counter them. You keep talking about Dumbledore like he's the enemy. He put you in that cupboard." Helga's voice was hard. "He instructed your relatives to break your spirit. Whatever his reasons, whatever his greater good, he made choices that harmed you. That makes him our enemy until proven otherwise." Harry thought about this. About the name he'd only learned tonight, Dumbledore, the greatest wizard of the age, according to Hagrid. The man who defeated Grindelwald, who led the fight against Voldemort, who ran Hogwarts and protected the magical world. And who decided that Harry Potter needed to be kept humble in a cupboard. "Yeah," Harry said slowly. "Yeah, I think I'm okay with him being the enemy." Godric grinned. "That's the spirit. Now," he turned to the others. "Shall we? The vault's about 50 miles east, if my memory serves." "Your memory of 1,000 years ago?" Rowena raised an eyebrow. "I'm excellent with directions. You got us lost for 3 days looking for that dragon nest in Wales. That was Salazar's fault." "My fault?" "You were the one who insisted we head toward the children," Helga interrupted, sounding fond and exasperated. "We're scaring Harry." Harry wasn't scared. He was, impossibly, smiling. These legendary figures, these founders of an ancient magical school, these people who'd emerged from death to protect him, they bickered like siblings. They argued and joked and interrupted each other, and it was the most human thing Harry had witnessed in his entire life. "I'm not scared," he said. "I'm just trying to keep up. You'll manage." Salazar's voice was gruff, but not unkind. "The Potter line has never lacked for adaptability. Then let's adapt to finding this vault." Helga took Harry's hand again. "Another apparition, I'm afraid. It'll be easier if you close your eyes." Harry closed his eyes. Helga's grip tightened. The world twisted, compressed, screamed. And when Harry opened his eyes again, he was standing before the ruins of a castle, half swallowed by the Scottish hills, with 4 founders of Hogwarts walking toward it like they were coming home. "Welcome," Godric said, his voice thick with something that might have been tears, "to Gryffindor Hold. Let's see what's left." Harry followed him through the broken gates. And somewhere, far to the south, in a castle that had stood for 1,000 years, an old man with a long white beard felt something shift in the magical fabric of Britain. He set down his cup of tea, his eyes going sharp and calculating. "Interesting," Albus Dumbledore murmured. "Most interesting indeed." The game had changed. And all the players were finally on the board. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, the reckoning of Privet Drive. The ruins of Gryffindor Hold stood against the Scottish sky like broken teeth, towers that had once reached toward the clouds now reduced to jagged stumps of stone. Ivy crawled across every surface, thick and ancient, and the wind whistled through gaps in walls that had stood strong for centuries before finally succumbing to time. Harry stood at the threshold of what had once been the main gate, staring up at the devastation. Beside him, Godric Gryffindor was utterly still, his face unreadable. 1,000 years, Godric said quietly. I suppose I shouldn't have expected it to survive intact. The outer structures collapsed, but the foundations are sound. Rowena had already begun her assessment, wand tracing patterns in the air as she walked the perimeter. Silver runes floated around her like attendant spirits. The ward stone is still active. Whatever magic you anchored here, Godric, it held. The vault? Underground. Protected by blood wards keyed to your line. Rowena paused, turning to look at Harry. And since Harry carries your blood, he can open it. Godric's grim expression shifted into something like hope. Come on, lad. Let's see if my paranoid younger self left us anything useful. They picked their way through the rubble, the four founders moving with a surety that spoke of long familiarity with dangerous terrain. Harry stumbled twice, his thin shoes inadequate for the broken stone, but Helga was always there, a steadying hand, a quiet word of encouragement. The entrance to the vault was hidden beneath what had once been the great hall's fireplace. The massive hearth had collapsed inward, but Salazar cleared the debris with a casual wave of his wand, revealing a stone door covered in carved runes. Blood ward, Salazar confirmed. Keyed to the Gryffindor line, with secondary authentication through magical signature. Clever work, Godric. Not elegant, but effective. I wasn't trying for elegant. I was trying for, keeps grave robbers out for a millennium. Godric turned to Harry. Press your hand against the center rune, the one that looks like a lion's head. The ward will read your blood and your magic. If it accepts you, the door opens. If it doesn't. What happens if it doesn't? It probably won't kill you. Probably. Reassuring. Harry stepped forward before he could lose his nerve. The stone was cold against his palm, the carved runes rough beneath his fingers. For a moment, nothing happened. Then heat bloomed from the door, spreading up his arm like warm water. The runes began to glow, gold and red, Gryffindor colors, and Harry felt something press against his mind. Not hostile, exactly. More like a question. A challenge. Who are you? The words weren't spoken aloud. They resonated in his skull, vibrating through his bones. I'm Harry Potter, he thought back, not knowing if it would work but trying anyway. I'm the heir. Heir to what? I don't know yet. That's what I'm trying to find out. A pause. The presence in his mind seemed to consider this answer, weighing it against criteria Harry couldn't understand. Honest, the voice finally said. Uncertain, but honest. That is acceptable. The door swung open. Beyond lay stairs descending into darkness, but as Harry watched, torches flickered to life along the walls, illuminating a passage that plunged deep into the earth. Well done. Godric clapped Harry on the shoulder, nearly staggering him. The ward liked you. That's a good sign. It was designed to reject anyone who wasn't true Gryffindor at heart, regardless of bloodline. What does true Gryffindor mean? Courage, primarily. But also honesty. A willingness to face hard truths rather than hide from them. Godric started down the stairs. My house was never about recklessness, whatever it became in later years. It was about the strength to stand for what you believe, even when standing alone. The stairs went down for what felt like miles. Harry counted steps at first, 100, 200, 300, before losing track somewhere around 500. The air grew cooler as they descended, and the torches shifted from warm orange to pale blue, casting strange shadows on the carved walls. Finally, they emerged into a vast underground chamber. Harry's breath caught. The vault was enormous, a cavern the size of a cathedral, its ceiling lost in darkness high above. Shelves lined every wall, stretching up and up until they vanished into shadow, and every shelf was packed with objects that glowed and glittered and pulsed with contained power. Books. Thousands of books, their spines marked with runes that shifted when Harry looked at them directly. Weapons hung in racks, swords and spears and things Harry didn't have names for, each one radiating an aura of danger. Potions gleamed in crystal vials, their contents swirling in colors that didn't exist in nature. Artifacts of every description sat on pedestals and in cases, protected by wards that hummed at the edge of hearing. Merlin's beard, Harry whispered. Merlin had nothing to do with it. Godric's voice was thick with emotion. This is everything I saved. Everything I couldn't bear to lose. He moved forward, running his hand along a shelf of books. I started collecting after the first war against Malachar. So many libraries burned, so much knowledge lost. I swore I'd preserve what I could. Malachar? Harry asked. The founders went still. We'll explain later, Helga said, but her voice had gone tight. For now, let's focus on what we can use. Godric, is there anything here that would help establish a proper residence? Several things. Godric shook off whatever mood had gripped him and moved deeper into the vault. I stored emergency supplies, enchanted tents, preserved food, medical equipment. And if I remember correctly. He rounded a corner and let out a whoop of triumph. Yes. The portable manor. He emerged carrying a small wooden box, no larger than a jewelry case, carved with intricate patterns. A portable manor? Harry asked. Spatial compression. Rowena took the box, examining it with professional interest. The manor exists in a pocket dimension accessible through this container. Very advanced work. I didn't know you had the patience for dimensional magic, Godric. I didn't. I commissioned it from a team of enchanters, cost me a fortune, but worth every galleon. He grinned at Harry. This, lad, is going to be our home for the foreseeable future. 3 floors, 12 bedrooms, full library, training room, and, if the preservation charms held, a fully stocked kitchen. You put a house in a box. Magic, Godric said cheerfully. Gets you every time. They set up the portable manor in a clearing a few miles from the ruined hold, far enough to avoid the collapsed structures, close enough to access the vault when needed. Godric placed the box on the ground, spoke a word in a language Harry didn't recognize, and stepped back. The box began to unfold. There was no other word for it. Walls emerged from impossible angles, stretching and multiplying, wood and stone materializing from nothing. Windows appeared, doors formed, a roof sealed itself into place. Within 30 seconds, a 3-story manor house stood where there had been empty grass. That, Harry said faintly, is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. Wait until you see the inside. Helga was already walking toward the front door. I remember when this was commissioned. I helped design the kitchen. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. Warm light emanated from floating orbs near the ceiling. The furniture was comfortable and well maintained, showing no signs of the millennium it had spent in storage. A fire crackled in the hearth, despite no one having lit it. The preservation charms held perfectly. Rowena nodded approvingly. This will serve admirably as a base of operations. Base of operations for what, exactly? Harry had been patient, incredibly patient, he felt, given the circumstances, but his curiosity was reaching its limit. You keep talking about plans and assessments and enemies. What are we actually going to do? The founders exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them, and then Salazar nodded. Sit down, Harry. It's time we had a proper conversation. They gathered in the manor's study, a room lined with books, dominated by a large desk and several comfortable chairs. Harry took the seat nearest the fire, grateful for its warmth after the chill of the underground vault. The founders arranged themselves around him, their expressions serious. "You asked what we're going to do," Salazar began. "The answer is complicated, because it depends on factors we don't yet fully understand. But the broad strokes are clear. First," Helga said, "we need to assess the current state of the magical world. Institutions, power structures, threats. What's changed since our deaths, and how dangerous is it? Second," Rowena continued, "we need to understand Dumbledore. His plans for you, his intentions for Hogwarts, his role in the wider political landscape. He's positioned himself as the leader of magical Britain, and that makes him either our greatest ally or our most dangerous enemy. Third," Godric said grimly, "we need to investigate whether Malachar is still contained. The vault's ward stone was still active, which is a good sign, but the binding beneath Hogwarts is separate. If it's weakened." "Who is Malachar?" Harry asked. "You mentioned him earlier," and everyone went quiet. Another exchange of glances. This time, Godric answered. "Malachar is, the reason Hogwarts exists. Not the school itself, we built that because we believed in education, but the location. The castle sits on top of a prison. A prison for what? For whom?" Salazar's voice was soft, almost reluctant. "Malachar Ashworth was a wizard who lived during our time. Brilliant. Powerful. And utterly, irredeemably insane. He started out well enough," Helga added. "A crusader for magical rights during the Muggle persecutions. He watched his family burn, and he swore to never let it happen again. But his methods." Rowena shook her head. "He began experimenting with dark magic. Blood rituals. Soul manipulation. He believed that if he could make himself powerful enough, he could protect all wizarding kind forever. It didn't work out that way." Godric's jaw tightened. "The rituals changed him. He stopped caring about protection and started caring about power. By the time we faced him, he'd killed thousands, wizards and muggles alike. He was trying to collapse the barrier between the living world and whatever lies beyond it. He wanted to unmake reality itself." Harry felt cold despite the fire. "You stopped him?" "We imprisoned him." Salazar's voice was flat. "We couldn't kill him, the rituals had made him something more than human. But we bound him to the ley lines beneath Scotland and built Hogwarts as a seal. As long as the castle stands, as long as the wards hold, Malachar remains trapped. But the wards are weakening." Rowena met Harry's eyes directly. "We could feel it even from the Gryffindor vault. Something is eroding the binding. Whether it's natural decay, deliberate sabotage, or the ripple effects of other dark magic, like Voldemort's activities, we don't know yet. So there's a mad god wizard trapped under my school, and he might be waking up." "Essentially, yes." Harry leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. "This is a lot." "We know." Helga moved to sit on the arm of his chair, her hand finding his shoulder. "And we're sorry to burden you with it so soon. But you asked for the truth, and we promised not to lie to you. I appreciate that." "I do." Harry rubbed his eyes beneath his glasses. "It's just. Yesterday morning, I was cleaning an attic and thinking about how no one cared that it was my birthday. Now I'm learning that I'm the heir to 4 legendary wizards, my parents were murdered by a Dark Lord, there's a piece of that Dark Lord in my head, and an even worse Dark Lord is maybe waking up under the school I'm supposed to attend. When you put it that way, it does sound rather overwhelming." Godric's attempt at lightness fell slightly flat. "What I'm wondering," Harry said slowly, "is why me? Not why the pact chose me, you explained that, the bloodlines and the conditions. But why would anyone design a system that puts this much responsibility on an 11-year-old? You're all legendary wizards. You fought Malachar the first time. why do you need me at all? The founders were quiet for a moment. Then Rowena spoke, her voice thoughtful. The pact wasn't designed to put responsibility on you, Harry. It was designed to give you choices. When we created it, we couldn't know what the world would look like when we returned. We couldn't know what challenges would face us. So we built in flexibility, a human anchor, someone native to the time, who could guide us and be guided by us in turn. You're not a weapon, Helga added firmly. You're not a tool. You're a partner. We're here to protect and train you, yes, but also to learn from you. To understand this world through your eyes. And, Salazar said, his tone practical, there are things you can do that we cannot. The binding on Malachar is key to the heir of the pact, that's you. When the time comes to reinforce or rebuild it, you'll be essential. Not because of your power, but because of your position. I'm a key. If you want to be reductive about it. Salazar's lips twitched. But a key that can think, and fight, and make choices of its own. That's rather more useful than a piece of metal. Harry absorbed this. It wasn't comforting, exactly, but it was honest. These people, these founders, weren't treating him like a child to be managed. They were treating him like a person whose role in events was different from theirs but no less important. Okay, he said finally. So what do we do first? First, we eat. Helga stood, her expression brooking no argument. You've had nothing but soup and stress since last night. The conversation can continue over breakfast. It's nearly noon. Then it'll be a very late breakfast. Come. The kitchen was, as promised, fully stocked, a preservation charm so effective that the bread was still warm from an oven that had been cold for 1,000 years. Helga took command, directing Godric to set the table while Rowena examined the pantry's contents and Salazar sat in a corner looking vaguely offended at being expected to participate in domestic tasks. Harry found himself seated at a massive wooden table, watching the four most legendary wizards in British history argue about whether eggs should be scrambled or fried. Scrambled is more nutritious, Helga insisted. Fried has better texture, Godric countered. The nutritional difference is negligible. Rowena didn't look up from the spice rack she was cataloging. None of this matters if we don't have eggs, Salazar pointed out. The preservation charm on animal products rarely. Helga opened the cold cabinet and produced a basket of perfectly preserved eggs. You were saying. Salazar subsided into dignified silence. Breakfast, lunch, really, was the best meal Harry had ever eaten. Not because the food was extraordinary, though it was good. Because he was eating at a real table, with people who included him in their conversation, who asked his opinion and listened to his answers. So Hogwarts still divides students into 4 houses? Godric asked, cutting into his sausage with enthusiasm. Named after us? According to Hagrid, yes. And there's a magic hat that sorts them. The sorting hat. Rowena smiled slightly. That was my contribution. A repository for our collective wisdom, designed to evaluate students and place them where they'd thrive best. Hagrid said Slytherin House has a reputation. Harry glanced at Salazar. For producing dark wizards. Salazar's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. A reputation, he repeated. And what, precisely, is this reputation based on? He said Voldemort was a Slytherin. And that you only wanted to accept pure-blood students. The temperature in the kitchen seemed to drop several degrees. I see. Salazar set down his fork with deliberate care. And did your giant friend explain why I supposedly held these views? He just said you and Godric had a falling out. That you wanted to be more selective about who was taught magic. Selective. Salazar's laugh was bitter. Is that how history remembers it? He turned to look at Godric. Did we have a falling out over blood purity? We had a falling out over security protocols. Godric met Harry's eyes, his expression serious. Salazar wanted stricter vetting of students' families, not their blood status, but their loyalties. We were still fighting Malakar's remnant followers at the time. The idea was to prevent infiltration. I wanted to ensure that no child brought to Hogwarts would be used as a weapon against us. Salazar's voice was controlled, but Harry could hear the old anger beneath it. Several students' parents were secret Malakar sympathizers. One attempted assassination. 2 attempted sabotage. I argued that we needed better screening processes, not to exclude Muggleborns, but to exclude families with dangerous allegiances. We disagreed on methods, Godric said. Sal wanted mind reading, loyalty oaths, background investigations. I thought we were becoming the authoritarians we'd fought against. We argued loudly. He left for a few years to cool off. But I came back. We reconciled. We continued building Hogwarts together for another 2 decades. Salazar's jaw was tight. And somewhere in the centuries after our deaths, someone decided that my concerns about security made for a better story if they were concerns about blood. The pureblood supremacy movement co-opted your name, Rowena added quietly. They needed historical legitimacy for their ideology. A founder who shared their views gave them that legitimacy. They twisted everything. Salazar stood abruptly, moving to the window. My house was meant to cultivate ambition, cunning, and resourcefulness. Traits that help the marginalized survive. I was a half-blood myself, Harry. My mother was Muggle-born. The idea that I would champion pureblood supremacy is obscene. Harry stared at him. This wasn't what he'd expected. The stories Hagrid had told, the whispers about Slytherin House, they painted a picture of a dark wizard, a bigot, a villain. But the man at the window looked more wounded than evil. I'm sorry, Harry said. For bringing it up. Don't be. Salazar turned, and his expression had smoothed back into neutral calm. You asked an honest question based on the information you had. That's not something to apologize for. He returned to his seat, picking up his fork again. But understand this, when we return to Hogwarts, I will be addressing what my house has become. Personally. That might cause some problems with the current students. Good. They need problems. They need someone to challenge the comfortable lies they've been raised with. Salazar's smile was sharp. It's been 1,000 years. Time for Slytherin House to remember what it was actually meant to be. After breakfast, they returned to the study to continue planning. But before they could dive into strategy, Rowena raised a concern. We need to address the immediate situation at Privet Drive. Harry frowned. I thought we were leaving them alone. Letting them live with knowing they were tools. We are. But there are complicating factors. Rowena produced a piece of parchment, Harry had no idea where from, and began sketching as she talked. The blood wards Dumbledore established are anchored to your aunt. They protect you from magical detection and from direct attack by those who wish you harm. But they only function if you call that place home. I don't call it home. I never did. Precisely. Which means the wards are already failing. Within days, perhaps hours, anyone tracking you magically will be able to find you. Including Voldemort's supporters, Salazar added. There are still Death Eaters at large, those who escaped justice by claiming the Imperious defense. If they learn Harry is vulnerable, then we need new protections. Godric leaned forward. Can we establish wards here? At the manor? We can, but it will take time to make them as robust as the Privet Drive protections. Dumbledore had a decade to layer and strengthen his wards. We have days at most. Then we work fast. Helga's voice was firm. Rowena designs the ward schema. Salazar and I handle the ritual components. Godric provides the power anchoring. And Harry? Harry learns. Rowena looked at him appraisingly. Ward magic is complex, but the principles are essential for any wizard to understand. Consider this your first lesson. The next several hours were an intensive education in magical theory. Rowena explained concepts that made Harry's head spin: ley lines and magical resonance, ward anchors and intention matrices, blood magic and ambient energy conversion. She drew diagrams, conjured illusions, and occasionally threw small objects at Harry to test his reflexes. "Why are you throwing things at me?" "Because you need to learn to react without thinking. Magical combat happens too fast for conscious decision-making. Your instincts need to be trained as thoroughly as your mind." By throwing shoes at my head. It was a book, not a shoe. And yes. By evening, Harry's brain felt like overcooked porridge, but he understood the basics of what they were attempting. The manor would be protected by a layered ward system: outer detection wards to alert them to approaching threats, middle defensive wards to deflect or delay attacks, and inner emergency wards that would transport them to safety if all else failed. "It's not as elegant as what Dumbledore built," Rowena admitted, "but it's faster to establish and more flexible. We can adjust and strengthen it over time." "When do we start?" "Tomorrow. Tonight, you rest." Helga appeared in the study doorway, and her expression permitted no argument. "You've had the longest day of your life, Harry. Your body needs sleep, and your mind needs time to process everything you've learned." "I don't feel tired. That's the adrenaline. It'll wear off soon, and when it does, you'll crash hard. Better to be in bed when that happens." She led him to a bedroom on the second floor, a comfortable space with a real bed, real sheets, and windows that looked out over the Scottish hills. The sunset was painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and for a moment Harry just stood at the window, watching. "Is this real?" he asked quietly. "Any of it?" "It's real." Helga stood beside him, her reflection visible in the glass. "I know it doesn't feel that way. I know everything has changed so fast that your mind can't keep up. But this is your life now, Harry. Magic and founders and dangers you're only beginning to understand. I keep expecting to wake up in the cupboard. You won't. I promise." She turned him gently away from the window. "Lie down. Sleep. We'll still be here in the morning." Harry climbed into the bed, the first real bed he could remember sleeping in, and pulled the covers up to his chin. The mattress was soft, the pillow was perfect, and the sheets smelled like lavender. "Helga?" "Yes. Thank you. For all of this." Her smile was like sunrise. "You're welcome, Harry. Sweet dreams." She left, closing the door softly behind her. Harry stared at the ceiling, his mind still buzzing despite his body's exhaustion. He had a family now. Strange and impossible and not at all what he'd imagined, but a family nonetheless. People who cared about him. People who were angry on his behalf. People who promised to stay. For the first time in 11 years, Harry Potter fell asleep feeling safe. He dreamed of darkness. Not the comfortable darkness of sleep, but something deeper, a void without stars, without ground, without any reference point at all. Harry stood in nothing, surrounded by nothing, and felt something watching him. "You came," a voice said. It wasn't spoken aloud. It resonated through the darkness itself, vibrating in Harry's bones. "Where am I?" "Nowhere. Everywhere. The space between spaces." The voice was calm, almost pleasant. "I've been waiting for you, little heir. Waiting so long." Harry tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. He was frozen, suspended in the void like a fly in amber. "Who are you? Don't you know? Your founders told you about me. I'm the monster under their castle. The nightmare they couldn't kill." A shape began to coalesce in the darkness, vaguely humanoid, but wrong somehow, angles that hurt to look at, proportions that didn't match reality. "I'm Malachar." Fear flooded through Harry, but underneath it was something else. Something that wouldn't let him scream or cower. You're supposed to be imprisoned. I am. For now. The shape moved closer, and Harry felt cold radiating from it like winter wind. But prisons decay. Seals weaken. And the ones who bound me are dust and memory. They're not. They're back. Yes, I felt their return. A pleasant surprise, actually. It means the game is worth playing again. Malakar's laugh echoed through the void. Tell them I said hello, little heir. Tell them I'm looking forward to our reunion. The shape lunged. Harry screamed. He woke gasping, tangled in sheets that felt like chains. Dawn light was streaming through the windows, and for a moment he couldn't remember where he was. The manor. The portable manor. Scotland. Real. It was real. Harry sat up slowly, pressing his palm against his forehead. His scar was burning, not painfully, but noticeably, a heat that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. The dream came back in fragments. The void. The voice. The shape that shouldn't exist. Tell them I said hello. Harry threw off the covers and ran for the door. He found the founders in the study, already awake, already working. Rowena was drawing word patterns on a large sheet of parchment. Salazar was reading a book whose title was in a language Harry didn't recognize. Godric was oiling his sword. Helga was brewing something in a small cauldron that smelled like honey. They all looked up when Harry burst in. Something's wrong. The words tumbled out before he could organize them. I had a dream, not a normal dream, there was darkness and a voice and he said to tell you, slow down. Helga was at his side in an instant, guiding him to a chair. Breathe. Start from the beginning. Harry breathed. And then, as calmly as he could manage, he described the dream. By the time he finished, the founder's expressions had shifted from concern to something colder. Something that looked almost like fear. He reached you. Rowena's voice was barely a whisper. The binding is weaker than we thought. It's the scar. Salazar stood abruptly, moving toward Harry. May I? Without waiting for an answer, his fingers pressed against Harry's forehead, against the lightning bolt mark. His eyes closed, and Harry felt something probing at the edges of his mind, not invasive exactly, but present. There's a channel, Salazar said after a long moment. The Horcrux fragment, it creates a bridge. Not just to Voldemort, but to anything connected to the dark magical substrate. Malakar used that bridge to reach Harry's dreams. Can you close it? Not without removing the Horcrux. And we can't do that safely without extensive preparation. Salazar opened his eyes, meeting Harry's gaze. For now, we teach you occlumency. Mental defenses. It won't close the channel, but it will let you guard the door. How long will that take? Months, normally. We don't have months. Salazar's jaw tightened. We'll accelerate the timeline. Crash course in mental defense, starting today. What about the wards? Helga asked. If Malakar can reach Harry through dreams, the wards won't help. This isn't a physical intrusion, it's psychic. The only defense is Harry's own mind. Then we train his mind. Godric set aside his sword. And we accelerate our timeline for everything else, too. We can't afford to spend weeks establishing ourselves while Malakar is already making moves. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we stop playing defense. Godric's eyes were hard. We go to Hogwarts. We confront Dumbledore. We assess the binding directly. If it's failing, we fix it. If someone's sabotaging it, we find them and stop them. That's reckless, Rowena said. We don't have enough information, we're not going to get enough information hiding in Scotland. The only way to learn what's happening at Hogwarts is to be at Hogwarts. Godric turned to Harry. What do you think, lad? You're part of this too. Harry thought about the voice in the darkness. The cold. The shape that hurt to see. Tell them I said hello. I think we need to move fast, he said. Malachar knew you were back. He's already planning something. If we wait, we give him time to prepare. Salazar nodded slowly. The boy has a point. Defensive positions favor the patient. If we want to disrupt Malachar's plans, we need to be unpredictable. Then it's decided. Godric stood, and his presence seemed to fill the room. We go to Hogwarts. Not as students, as the founders returning to reclaim our legacy. We force Dumbledore to deal with us openly, we investigate the binding, and we show Malachar that his old enemies are back and not afraid. And Harry? Helga's voice was sharp with concern. He's 11. We can't drag him into a confrontation with Dumbledore and an investigation of an ancient evil. I'm already involved. Harry met her eyes steadily. Malachar reached out to me specifically. That means he sees me as important, either as a threat or as an opportunity. Hiding won't change that. He's right. Salazar's voice was soft, almost approving. And his presence legitimizes ours. We returned because of the heir of the pact. If we leave him behind, we undermine our own authority. Helga still looked unhappy, but she didn't argue further. Then we have preparations to make. Rowena was already rolling up her parchment, her mind clearly shifting to logistics. We'll need to establish credentials, craft our approach to Dumbledore, decide how much to reveal and to whom. This isn't something we can rush. How long? Godric asked. 3 days. Perhaps 4. Long enough to do it properly, short enough to maintain momentum. And during those days, Harry learns occlumency. Salazar's gaze was evaluating. Starting now. Learning occlumency was, Harry decided after 3 hours, the worst thing that had ever happened to him. And given his childhood, that was saying something. The concept was simple enough: build walls in your mind, protect your thoughts from intrusion, maintain control even when something was trying to crack you open. The execution was excruciating. Again, Salazar said, his wand pointed at Harry's forehead. Clear your mind. Push everything down. And this time, try not to scream. I didn't scream. You whimpered. It's close enough. Legilimens. The invasion was like ice water flooding his skull. Harry felt Salazar's presence rifling through his thoughts, memories of the Dursleys surfacing unbidden, fears and hopes and embarrassments parading past like exhibits in a museum. Push back, Salazar's mental voice commanded. Don't just endure. Fight. Harry tried. He visualized walls, barriers, anything to stop the flood. But the memories kept coming: Dudley's fists, Vernon's belt, Petunia's cold eyes, and underneath them, the voice from his dream. Tell them I said hello. Salazar withdrew abruptly. Harry gasped, his hands flying to his temples. You're letting your emotions control you, Salazar said, his tone clinical rather than critical. When I push, your fear surfaces first. You need to separate your feelings from your defenses. How? Practice. Meditation. Learning to observe your emotions rather than be consumed by them. Salazar sat back, studying Harry. You've spent your entire life suppressing your feelings to survive. That actually helps. You have experience with emotional control, even if you don't think of it that way. We need to redirect that skill. At the Dursleys, I just went somewhere else in my head. When things got bad. That's dissociation. It's a defense mechanism, but not a useful one for our purposes. We need you present and protected, not absent and vulnerable. Salazar paused. Show me. Show me where you went. Harry didn't understand, but he tried to obey. He let his mind drift the way it used to when Vernon was shouting or Dudley was hitting, that gray place where nothing quite touched him, where he floated above the pane like a leaf on water. There. Salazar's voice was suddenly sharp. I see it. That's not dissociation, that's an instinctive mental shield. You created it yourself, without training. I did. It's rudimentary, but the foundation is solid. We can build on this. Salazar actually smiled, a thin expression, but genuine. You have natural talent, Harry. Most people take months to develop what you created by accident as a child. Years of abuse will do that to you. Apparently so. The smile faded. Let's try again. This time, instead of going to that gray place, try to expand it. Make it larger. Make it encompass all of your mind. Harry closed his eyes and reached for the gray. By evening, Harry could maintain his mental shields for almost 30 seconds against Salazar's probing. It wasn't much, but Salazar called it remarkably fast progress, and Helga forced them to stop for dinner. The meal was quiet, everyone lost in their own thoughts. Harry ate mechanically, his head aching from the constant mental assault, his thoughts still feeling raw and exposed. Tomorrow, we practice something different, Salazar said eventually. False memories. If someone does breach your shields, you need to be able to mislead them. Lie with my mind. Essentially. Show them what you want them to see, not what's actually there. Harry thought about all the lies he'd told the Dursleys over the years. The excuses, the deflections, the careful management of their expectations. I think I can do that. I suspect you can. Salazar's voice held a note of dark amusement. You've had practice. After dinner, Harry retreated to his room to rest his battered mind. But sleep wouldn't come, his thoughts kept circling back to the dream, the void, the voice that had known his name. A knock at the door startled him upright. Come in. Godric entered, looking slightly uncomfortable. The founder was a man of action, Harry had learned, and emotional conversations clearly weren't his strength. Can't sleep. My head hurts too much. Sal pushes hard. It's his way. Godric settled into the chair by the window. He's not trying to be cruel. He just doesn't always remember that other people have limits. I know. I'm not complaining. I know you're not. That's part of why I'm here. Godric ran a hand through his wild red hair. You've been handling all this remarkably well. Too well, maybe. It's been less than 2 days, and you've accepted everything we've told you without really questioning it. Should I be questioning it? You should be doing whatever helps you process. And for most people, that includes some denial, some disbelief, some pushback. Godric's eyes were kind. You haven't pushed back at all. I'm wondering why. Harry was quiet for a moment, trying to find words for something he hadn't consciously considered. I think. I've always known something was wrong. With my life, with the Dursleys, with everything. He stared at his hands. This, magic, founders, ancient evils, it's not what I expected. But it feels more real than what I had before. The cupboard, the chores, the hatred, that never made sense. This does. That's actually quite profound for an 11-year-old. I've had a lot of time to think. There's not much else to do in a cupboard. Godric was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. I'm sorry. For what you went through. For the fact that we weren't there to prevent it. You were dead. That's a pretty good excuse. Even so. Godric leaned forward, his expression intense. I want you to understand something, Harry. What happened to you wasn't your fault. It wasn't because you were bad, or worthless, or any of the other lies those people told you. It happened because adults failed you, Dumbledore, the Ministry, everyone who should have been watching out for the boy who lived. I don't think of myself as the boy who lived. Good. That's a title other people gave you. It doesn't define who you are. Godric's hand landed on Harry's shoulder, warm and heavy. Who you are is someone brave, and smart, and stronger than he knows. Who you are is the heir of the Founder's Pact, not because of some ancient magic, but because of what's inside you. We didn't choose you randomly, Harry. The Pact chose you because you have the potential to be extraordinary. Harry didn't know what to say. No one had ever talked to him like this, like he mattered, like his existence had value, like his future held anything but more cupboards and chores. Thank you, he managed. Don't thank me. Just prove me right. Godric stood, heading for the door. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be another long day. Harry lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The Pact chose you because you have the potential to be extraordinary. He didn't feel extraordinary. He felt tired, and overwhelmed, and scared. But for the first time in his life, he also felt like maybe, just maybe, he could become something more than what he'd been. Sleep, when it finally came, was mercifully dreamless. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of training and preparation. Mornings were a clemency with Salazar, grueling sessions that left Harry's head pounding but his mental shields incrementally stronger. By the third day, he could maintain a basic defense against Salazar's probing for nearly a minute, and could project a simple false memory, an image of Dudley eating cake, convincingly enough to fool a casual examination. Good, Salazar said after one session. Not sufficient to stop a determined legilimens, but enough to buy you time. We'll continue refining. Afternoons were magical theory with Rowena, lectures and demonstrations that expanded Harry's understanding of how magic actually worked. He learned about magical cores and energy channels, about wand movements and verbal components, about the difference between accidental magic and controlled casting. Magic is not a supernatural force, Rowena explained. It's a natural one, just one that most humans can't perceive or manipulate. Wizards and witches have an additional sense, an additional capability, that lets us interact with the magical substrate of reality. Understanding that substrate is the first step to mastering it. Evenings were practical exercises with Godric, physical training, combat awareness, and the basics of magical dueling. Harry had no wand yet, but Godric insisted on teaching the foundational movements anyway. A wand is a focus, not a crutch, Godric said, demonstrating a defensive stance. The magic comes from you. The wand just helps direct it. If you learn the principles first, the wand becomes a tool rather than a limitation. And throughout all of it, Helga was there, making sure Harry ate, slept, and didn't push himself past breaking. She also taught him more subtle things, how to read people, how to project calm in stressful situations, how to recognize when someone was lying. Politics is combat by other means, she said during one lesson. You'll face enemies who never draw a wand but are just as dangerous as any dark wizard. Learn to see through masks, and learn to wear your own when necessary. By the fourth day, Harry felt like a different person. Still 11, still untrained in the formal sense, but no longer helpless. He had shields in his mind. He had knowledge in his head. He had the beginnings of skills that could protect him. And he had family. Strange, impossible family, but family nonetheless. We're ready, Godric announced at breakfast on the fourth morning. The approach is planned, the contingencies are in place, and Harry's shields are strong enough to protect his surface thoughts. It's time to go to Hogwarts. Today. Harry's stomach flipped. Today. We'll approach through Hogsmeade, the village near the school. From there, we'll send word to Dumbledore requesting a meeting. Requesting? Salazar raised an eyebrow. We're the founders. We don't request. We also don't antagonize unnecessarily. A meeting request is polite. If he refuses or delays, we escalate. Godric grinned. But I suspect he won't refuse. He'll be too curious about who we are and what we want. And what do we want? Harry asked. What's our actual goal for this meeting? Information. Rowena took over, her voice precise. "We want to assess Dumbledore, his capabilities, his intentions, his knowledge of the Malachar situation. We want to examine the castle's wards and the binding beneath. And we want to establish ourselves as a power he has to reckon with." Show of strength, Salazar summarized. "Without being overtly hostile. We make clear that we're back, that we have authority over Hogwarts, and that his cooperation would be wise." "And if he doesn't cooperate?" The founders exchanged glances. "Then things get complicated," Godric said. "But we'll deal with that if it happens. For now, let's focus on the plan that doesn't involve me stabbing anyone." "A novel approach for you," Salazar murmured. "I'm growing as a person." Harry couldn't help it. He laughed. And just like that, some of the tension in the room dissolved. These people, these legendary figures, bickered and joked and gave each other grief like any family might. They were powerful and dangerous and ancient, but they were also human. Harry had found his people. Now it was time to face the world that had forgotten them. "Let's go," he said. And they did. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, The Letters and the Lies. Hogsmeade looked like something out of a storybook. Harry stood at the edge of the village, taking in the crooked chimneys and thatched roofs, the shop windows glowing with magical light, the cobblestone streets that seemed to wind in impossible directions. Witches and wizards wandered past in robes of every color, talking and laughing and paying no attention to the group of newcomers watching from the shadows. "It's grown," Rowena murmured, her eyes tracking the buildings. "When we founded Hogwarts, this was barely a hamlet. A few houses for staff who didn't want to live in the castle. 1,000 years is a long time." Godric adjusted his cloak, a mundane brown thing that hid his distinctive crimson robes. They'd all adopted glamours for the approach, appearing as unremarkable travelers rather than legendary figures. People build. Communities expand. It's the nature of things. The magical signature is strong here. Salazar's eyes were half closed, his senses extended in ways Harry didn't fully understand. The proximity to Hogwarts saturates the area. Even the muggles who wander too close probably feel something, even if they can't name it. "Can we focus on the plan?" Helga's voice was patient but firm. "We're not here for tourism." The plan was straightforward: send a formal message to Dumbledore requesting a meeting, then wait for his response. If he agreed, they'd proceed to the castle openly. If he refused or delayed, they'd enter anyway and force the confrontation. "The Three Broomsticks," Rowena said, pointing toward a pub with a worn wooden sign. "We can send our message from there and wait for a response. Public setting, neutral ground." They made their way through the village, Harry sticking close to Helga's side. Even disguised, he felt exposed, like everyone was watching, everyone knew he didn't belong. The feeling was irrational, but hard to shake. The Three Broomsticks was warm and crowded, filled with the smell of butterbeer and roasting meat. A woman behind the bar, middle-aged, with a kind face and impressive figure, looked up as they entered. "Travelers," she called out. "Find a seat anywhere. I'll be with you in a moment." They claimed a table in the corner, positioning themselves with clear sightlines to both doors. Old habits, Harry realized. These were people who'd spent decades watching for threats. "I'll send the message." Rowena produced a small piece of parchment from her sleeve, along with a quill that seemed to write by itself as she spoke quietly. Formal tone, clear purpose, no threats implied. "What are you telling him?" Harry asked. "That the founders of Hogwarts have returned. That we request a meeting with the current headmaster to discuss matters of mutual concern. That we'll await his response at this establishment." Rowena paused, reviewing the text. Simple. Direct. It puts the ball in his court. She folded the parchment into an intricate shape, an origami bird, Harry realized, and breathed on it softly. The paper shimmered, took on color and texture, and suddenly a living owl sat on the table, blinking at them. "Go," Rowena murmured. Find Albus Dumbledore. Wait for a response. The owl launched itself into the air, weaving between patrons and out through a window that hadn't been open a moment before. Several people glanced up, then returned to their drinks. Apparently, magical owls were common enough not to merit attention. Now we wait. Godric flagged down the barmaid. Might as well eat while we're here. For butterbeers and whatever you'd recommend for lunch. The food arrived quickly, hearty stew, fresh bread, and flagons of butterbeer that foamed and sparkled with an inner light. Harry took a cautious sip and found it delicious, sweet and warming, with a slight fizz that tickled his nose. Good. Helga smiled at his expression. Really good. Butterbeer hasn't changed much, then. We used to serve it at the castle, back in the early days. The house elves had a recipe that. She stopped, her head turning sharply toward the door. Harry followed her gaze and felt his stomach drop. A man had entered the pub, tall and thin, with a long white beard and half-moon spectacles perched on a crooked nose. He wore robes of deep purple, embroidered with silver stars, and carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who expected to be recognized and respected. Albus Dumbledore. Well, Salazar murmured, not looking up from his stew. That was faster than expected. Dumbledore's eyes swept the room, passing over other patrons before landing on their corner table. His expression was pleasant, grandfatherly, utterly unreadable. He made his way toward them without hurrying, nodding greetings to people who called out his name. May I join you? His voice was warm, conversational. I received your most intriguing message and thought I'd respond in person. Please. Godric gestured to an empty chair. We were just discussing whether you'd send a response or come yourself. I've found that some conversations are best had face-to-face. Dumbledore settled into the chair, his eyes twinkling behind his spectacles. Particularly conversations with people claiming to be thousand-year-old founders risen from the dead. Claiming? Salazar's voice was silk over steel. A reasonable skepticism, I think you'll agree. The founders of Hogwarts have been dead for centuries. Their return would be unprecedented. And yet, here we are. Rowena's tone was equally smooth. Would you like proof, headmaster? I could describe the ward schema I designed for the castle. Salazar could open the chamber of secrets that bears his name. Godric could demonstrate magic that hasn't been seen since the medieval period. Or we could simply walk into Hogwarts and let the castle itself confirm our identity. Godric leaned back, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. The stones know their builders. The wards know their creators. We could settle this question in minutes. Dumbledore's twinkle didn't falter, but something shifted behind his eyes. A calculation. An adjustment. Perhaps that won't be necessary. He steepled his fingers. Let us assume, for the moment, that you are who you claim to be. The founders of Hogwarts, returned after a millennium. The more pressing question becomes, why now? And what do you want? We want what we've always wanted. Helga's voice was firm. To protect Hogwarts and the students it serves. To preserve magical knowledge and traditions. To stand against threats that would harm our world. Noble goals. But rather vague. Dumbledore's gaze drifted to Harry, and something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps, or concern. And who is your young companion? He seems familiar somehow. Harry felt the founders stiffen around him. This was the moment they'd prepared for, the first direct acknowledgement. This is Harry Potter. Godric's voice was steady. The air of the founders packed. The reason we've returned. Silence. Dumbledore's twinkling expression didn't change, but Harry could feel the sudden tension radiating from the old wizard. Harry Potter, Dumbledore repeated slowly. I see. And how did you come to be in the company of these founders? They appeared in my cupboard. Harry met Dumbledore's gaze directly, refusing to look away. On my birthday. After I found the tablet that summoned them. Your cupboard. The cupboard under the stairs. At number 4, Privet Drive. Where I've been sleeping for the past 10 years. Another silence, longer this time. Dumbledore's expression remained pleasant, but Harry thought he saw something crack behind those half-moon spectacles. I see, Dumbledore said again. That is most unfortunate. Unfortunate. Salazar's voice could have frozen fire. Is that the word you'd use? The Dursleys were meant to provide Harry with a safe home. The blood wards I established protected him from external threats while allowing internal abuse to flourish. Rowena cut in. We've examined your wards, Headmaster. Clever work. But they only guard against those who wish Harry harm from outside the family. His relatives were free to neglect and mistreat him without triggering any protections. An oversight, was it? Godric leaned forward. Or was it intentional? We've spoken to Harry's uncle. He told us about your letter. The one that instructed them to keep Harry humble, to ensure he didn't grow up thinking he was special. Dumbledore's expression flickered, just for an instant, before smoothing back into benevolent calm. The letter was meant to prevent him from becoming arrogant. Fame can corrupt a young mind. I thought a grounded upbringing would serve him better. Grounded. Helga's laugh was harsh and utterly without humor. Is that what you call sleeping in a cupboard? Being starved? Being beaten by his cousin while his aunt and uncle watched? I did not intend for any of that to happen. But it did happen. And you never checked. 10 years, Dumbledore. 10 years, and you never once visited to see how the boy who lived was actually living. The pub had grown quieter around them. Other patrons were shooting glances at their table, sensing the tension even if they couldn't hear the words. The barmaid hovered uncertainly near the bar. Dumbledore was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its warmth. I made decisions based on the information I had. The blood wards were essential for Harry's protection. Placing him with his relatives was the only way to maintain them. If his upbringing was less than ideal, then I bear some responsibility for that. But my intentions were to keep him alive and safe. Safe for what? Harry asked quietly. Dumbledore's eyes snapped to him. What do you mean, my boy? You kept me alive. You kept me hidden. You made sure I grew up knowing nothing about magic, nothing about my parents, nothing about why they died. Harry's voice was steady, but his hands were clenched beneath the table. You've been planning something. Something you needed me alive and ignorant for. What is it? For the first time, Dumbledore looked genuinely surprised. His eyes searched Harry's face, looking for something, the scared, grateful child he'd expected to find, perhaps. You're remarkably perceptive for your age. I've had good teachers this week. Dumbledore glanced at the founders, then back to Harry. The twinkle had gone from his eyes entirely now, replaced by something harder to read. Very well. You want honesty. I'll give you what I can. He folded his hands on the table. Voldemort is not dead. The night he attacked your parents, the curse that rebounded destroyed his body but not his spirit. He survives as a wraith, somewhere in the world, waiting for an opportunity to return. We know this, Salazar said. We can feel his presence on Harry's scar. Then you know why Harry needed protection. Why he needed to be hidden. When Voldemort returns, and he will return, Harry will be his primary target. The prophecy, Dumbledore stopped. What prophecy? Harry asked. Dumbledore was silent. What prophecy? Harry repeated. There is a prophecy, Dumbledore said finally, reluctantly. Made before your birth. It speaks of a child born at the end of July, born to those who thrice defied Voldemort. A child with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord. And that child is Harry. Rowena's voice was flat. The prophecy could have referred to another child as well. But Voldemort chose to interpret it as meaning Harry. His attack on your family, Harry, was an attempt to eliminate the prophesied threat before it could grow. Harry felt cold despite the warmth of the pub. So I'm supposed to vanquish Voldemort. The prophecy suggests you have the power to do so. Whether you choose to act on that power is, of course, your decision. Is it? Godric's voice was sharp. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been shaping Harry's entire life to prepare him for that confrontation. Keeping him ignorant. Keeping him isolated. Making sure he arrives at Hogwarts damaged and grateful for any kindness shown to him. Dumbledore's expression tightened. That is an uncharitable interpretation of my actions. Then give us a more charitable one. The two men stared at each other, ancient wizard and returned founder, each measuring the other. I have made mistakes, Dumbledore said finally. I freely admit that. But every decision I've made has been in service of protecting the wizarding world from Voldemort's return. Harry is central to that protection. I needed him to survive, and I needed him to remain unknown until he was ready to face his destiny. Ready according to whose standards? Helga demanded. Yours. You decided when he would learn about magic, when he would enter our world, when he would understand his own history. You took away his choices in the name of protecting him. I gave him a childhood, you gave him a cupboard and a lie. The silence stretched. Around them, the pub's other patrons had gone very quiet, clearly aware that something significant was happening even if they couldn't follow the details. Perhaps, Dumbledore said slowly, we should continue this conversation somewhere more private. The castle, perhaps. An excellent suggestion. Godric rose to his feet. Lead the way, headmaster. Let's see what's become of our school. The walk to Hogwarts took 20 minutes, during which nobody spoke. Harry used the time to study Dumbledore, trying to reconcile the grandfatherly image with the manipulator the founders had described. The old wizard walked with easy grace despite his apparent age, nodding to people they passed, seemingly untroubled by the tension surrounding him. Was he evil? Harry didn't think so. The founders hadn't called him evil either, they'd called him dangerous, controlling, certain of his own righteousness. A man who did terrible things for what he believed were good reasons. Harry wasn't sure if that was better or worse than simple villainy. The castle appeared gradually, emerging from the Scottish mists like a dream becoming real. Towers and turrets, walls and windows, a sprawling structure that seemed to defy architectural logic. It should have been overwhelming, and it was, in a way, but Harry also felt something else as they approached. Recognition. Welcome. Home. You feel it, Helga murmured beside him. The castle knows you. How is that possible? I've never been here before. The castle isn't just stone and mortar. It's magic made manifest, shaped by the will and power of its founders. We poured part of ourselves into every wall, every ward, every enchantment. Her voice was soft, almost reverent. You carry our blood, Harry. The castle recognizes that blood. It's been waiting for you. The gates swung open as they approached, not in response to Dumbledore, Harry noticed, but before he even raised his hand. The headmaster's eyes narrowed slightly at this, but he said nothing. The entrance hall was vast and echoing, lit by floating candles that cast dancing shadows on the stone walls. Portraits watched from their frames, whispering to each other as the group passed. A few of them gasped audibly when they saw the founders. Is that, it can't be, by Merlin's grace, it's them. Dumbledore led them up a moving staircase, through corridors that seemed to shift and change, until they reached a stone gargoyle guarding a recessed doorway. Sherbet lemon, Dumbledore said. The gargoyle leaped aside, and the wall behind it split to reveal a spiral staircase. Your office? Rowena asked. The headmaster's office. It will give us privacy. They ascended the stairs and emerged into a circular room filled with strange silver instruments, portraits of previous headmasters, and an enormous desk covered in parchment. A beautiful red and gold bird sat on a perch near the window, watching them with intelligent eyes. "Fox," Godric said softly. "Is that you?" The phoenix trilled, a sound of pure joy, and launched itself from the perch to land on Godric's shoulder. "You know this bird?" Dumbledore asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Fox was a friend, once. A long time ago." Godric stroked the phoenix's feathers. "I'm glad to see you've survived, old friend." The phoenix trilled again, then fluttered to Harry's shoulder. Harry froze, unsure what to do, but Fox simply nuzzled against his cheek and sang a soft note that made him feel inexplicably calm. "Interesting." Dumbledore's eyes tracked the interaction. "Fox doesn't usually warm to strangers." "Harry isn't a stranger. Not to anyone connected to Hogwarts." Rowena had moved to examine the silver instruments on a nearby table. "These are monitoring devices. Keyed to Harry." She turned sharply. "You've been monitoring him?" "Basic protective enchantments. They alert me if he's in serious danger." "They do more than that. This one tracks his location. This one monitors his magical output. This one," Rowena's voice went cold. "This one records emotional states. You've been spying on an 11-year-old's feelings. I've been ensuring his safety. By invading his privacy in ways he never consented to and never knew about." Rowena waved her wand, and the devices began to shake. "These are coming down. Those instruments have protected Harry they've done nothing of the sort. They've given you information. Information you never used to help him, only to monitor him." The devices shattered, silver components scattering across the floor. "Your surveillance ends now." Dumbledore's expression finally cracked. For a moment, Harry saw something beneath the grandfatherly mask, frustration, perhaps, or fear. "You're making a mistake," the headmaster said quietly. "You don't understand the threats Harry faces." "Then enlighten us." Godric settled into a chair without being invited, Fox still perched on his shoulder. "You mentioned a prophecy. You mentioned Voldemort's survival. What else haven't you told us?" "There's a reason I kept Harry ignorant, there's a reason you kept Harry controllable. Those aren't the same thing." Dumbledore was silent for a long moment. Then he moved to his own chair, lowering himself slowly, suddenly looking every one of his considerable years. "Very well. If you want the full truth, I'll give it to you." He waved his wand, and several bottles of a golden liquid appeared on the desk along with glasses. "But I warn you, the truth is complicated. And not all of it is pleasant. We're not afraid of unpleasant truths." Salazar took a glass but didn't drink. "We've lived through worse than you can imagine." "Perhaps." Dumbledore poured himself a measure of what Harry assumed was some kind of alcohol. "Let me start with what I know about the night Harry's parents died." The story took over an hour to tell. Dumbledore explained about the Order of the Phoenix, the resistance organization he'd founded to fight Voldemort. About the Potters going into hiding after learning they were targeted. About the Fidelius charm that should have kept them safe, and the traitor who betrayed them. "Peter Pettigrew," Dumbledore said. "A friend of your father's. He was their secret keeper, the only one who could reveal their location. He sold them to Voldemort for reasons I still don't fully understand." "Where is he now?" Harry's voice was tight. "Dead. Supposedly. He confronted Sirius Black, another of your father's friends, and was killed in the resulting explosion. Black was sent to Azkaban for the murder." "Supposedly dead." Dumbledore hesitated. "I've had concerns. The evidence was circumstantial. But the ministry was satisfied, and I had more pressing matters to attend to. More pressing than justice for the man who betrayed Harry's parents." Helga's voice was sharp. Sirius Black was James Potter's best friend, Dumbledore said heavily. Everyone believed he was the secret keeper. When the Potters died, the assumption was that he'd betrayed them. I didn't argue because I wasn't certain it was wrong. But you had doubts. I had questions. Questions I've never been able to answer. Dumbledore took a long drink. There are many things about that night that don't add up. The prophecy's exact wording. The precise nature of the protection Lily's sacrifice created. The fact that Harry survived it all. The Horcrux. Salazar's voice was flat. Dumbledore went very still. You know about that. We felt it the moment we encountered Harry. A fragment of Voldemort's soul, lodged in his scar. Salazar's eyes were cold. Did you know? I suspected. I wasn't certain until recently. And were you planning to tell him? Or were you going to let him walk around with a piece of Dark Lord in his head indefinitely? The situation is complex. The situation is that you've been keeping secrets that directly affect Harry's life and safety. Secrets he has a right to know. Salazar stood, his presence suddenly dominating the room. We've heard enough of your justifications. Let me be direct, your guardianship of Harry Potter ends today. Dumbledore's eyes narrowed. I am his magical guardian. The ministry appointed you because there was no one else. Now there is. Salazar gestured to the other founders. We are claiming custody of the heir of our pact. If you wish to contest this, you're welcome to try. But I suggest you consider carefully before making an enemy of the 4 founders of Hogwarts. This isn't about enmity, no. It's about Harry. Salazar's voice softened slightly. We don't want to fight you, Dumbledore. We recognize that you've done good things, that you've fought against darkness, that your intentions, however misguided, were not malicious. But your time as Harry's puppet master is over. He's under our protection now. The room was very quiet. And what of Hogwarts? Dumbledore asked finally. What of the school? We'll evaluate it. Observe. See what's been done in our absence and whether it meets our standards. Rowena's voice was calm but firm. Harry will attend as a student, that much hasn't changed. But we'll be watching. And if we find that our legacy has been corrupted, we'll take steps to correct it. You would remove me as headmaster? If necessary. We founded this school, Dumbledore. We have authority over it that supersedes any appointment by the Ministry or the Board of Governors. Rowena paused. But that's not our preference. We'd rather work with you than against you. The question is whether you're willing to do the same. Dumbledore looked at each of them in turn, Salazar with his cold certainty, Rowena with her analytical calm, Godric with his barely contained energy, Helga with her fierce protectiveness. And then he looked at Harry, sitting quietly in his chair, watching everything with eyes far too old for his young face. What do you want, Harry? Dumbledore asked. Not what they want. What do you want? Harry considered the question carefully. He thought about the cupboard. The lies. The prophecy that had shaped his entire life without his knowledge or consent. I want the truth, he said. All of it. No more secrets, no more manipulation, no more decisions made about my life without my input. He met Dumbledore's eyes steadily. The founders have been honest with me since the moment they appeared. They've told me hard things, scary things, but they've told me. Can you say the same? Dumbledore was silent. I didn't think so. Harry stood. I'm willing to give you a chance, Professor. The founders say you're not evil, just controlling. Maybe they're right. But if you want my trust, you're going to have to earn it. Starting now. A long pause. Then, slowly, Dumbledore nodded. Very well. Ask your questions. I'll answer what I can. The interrogation lasted another 2 hours. Harry asked about his parents, their personalities, their lives, their relationship. Dumbledore answered with what seemed like genuine warmth, painting a picture of two people who had been brave and loving and deeply committed to each other and to the fight against darkness. Rowena asked about the castle's wards, their current state, their maintenance, any anomalies that had been detected. Dumbledore admitted that some of the older protections had weakened over the centuries, but insisted that the core defenses remained strong. Salazar asked about the Chamber of Secrets, whether it had been found, whether anything had been disturbed. Dumbledore's answer was careful: the chamber had been opened once, 50 years ago, resulting in a student's death. It had been sealed again, and the perpetrator, a student named Tom Riddle, had been expelled. Tom Riddle. Salazar's eyes narrowed. That name means something to you. Tom Riddle grew up to become Lord Voldemort. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. You knew. You knew who he was, what he was becoming, and you let him walk out of this school. I suspected. I didn't know. And by the time I was certain, it was too late. Dumbledore's voice was heavy with old regret. Tom was brilliant and charming and utterly without conscience. He fooled everyone, myself included. He didn't fool my house. He corrupted it. Salazar's voice was tight with controlled fury. 50 years. For 50 years, my legacy has been associated with the man who became Voldemort. Do you have any idea what that means? I do. And I'm sorry. Sorry isn't sufficient. Godric asked about the staff, who taught what, who could be trusted, who might be problematic. Dumbledore provided a rundown: McGonagall in Transfiguration, Snape in Potions, Flitwick in Charms, and so on. When he mentioned Snape, the founders exchanged glances. Severus Snape, Helga said. The potions master. He was a Death Eater, wasn't he? He was. He turned spy for us before Voldemort's fall. He's been loyal to our cause ever since. And you trust him with children? I trust him completely. Based on what? Dumbledore hesitated. Based on information I cannot share. Suffice it to say that Severus has reasons, deeply personal reasons, to oppose Voldemort and everything he represents. That's not good enough. Salazar leaned forward. You're asking us to accept that a former Death Eater, a man who followed Voldemort willingly, who participated in his atrocities, should be allowed to teach students in our school. We need more than vague assurances. Then you'll have to take my word for it. Some secrets are not mine to share. The standoff lasted several seconds. Then Salazar sat back, his expression unreadable. We'll be watching him closely. I would expect nothing less. Finally, Harry asked the question that had been burning in his mind since the beginning. The piece of Voldemort in my head. How do we remove it? Dumbledore went very still. I don't know. You don't know. Horcruxes, soul fragments, are among the darkest magic known to wizard kind. They're not supposed to be removable without destroying the vessel. In your case, the vessel is your own body. Dumbledore's voice was soft. I've spent years researching, trying to find an alternative. So far, I've found nothing. So I'm stuck with a piece of Dark Lord in my head forever. I'm hoping for another solution. But yes, for now, that appears to be the case. Harry felt cold. He'd known about the Horcrux since the founders had told him, but hearing Dumbledore confirm that there was no known cure. We'll find a way. Helga's hand found his shoulder. There's always a way. We just haven't discovered it yet. The founders' combined knowledge exceeds my own, Dumbledore admitted. Perhaps with fresh perspectives. Perhaps. Rowena's voice was thoughtful. We'll need access to your research. Everything you've learned about Horcruxes and their destruction. Of course. I'll have it compiled for you. The conversation wound down after that. Arrangements were made. Harry would stay with the founders in the portable manor for the rest of the summer, receiving private instruction in addition to preparing for his first year at Hogwarts. The founders would be given guest quarters in the castle, allowing them to observe classes and evaluate the current state of magical education. A formal announcement would be prepared for the start of term, introducing the founders to the school and explaining their role. "One more thing," Dumbledore said as they prepared to leave. "The Philosopher's Stone." The founders paused. "What about it?" "It's here. In the castle. I'm using Hogwarts as protection against someone who wishes to steal it." Nicholas Flamel's stone. Rowena's eyes widened. "I thought that was legend." "Nicholas is very real, and so is his stone. He's asked me to protect it until alternative arrangements can be made." "Protect it how?" "A series of challenges and traps, designed to stop anyone who tries to reach it." "And you've placed this in a school full of children?" Dumbledore's expression flickered. "The protections are extensive. No student could possibly, no student should have to." Godric's voice was flat. "You've turned our school into a vault. A target. If someone is after the stone, they'll come here, and they'll endanger every child in this castle. The wards are not impenetrable. Nothing is." Godric shook his head. "We'll discuss this further. But I want it on record that we object to this arrangement in the strongest possible terms." "Noted." They left the headmaster's office in silence, the weight of everything they'd learned pressing down on them. Harry walked between Helga and Godric, Fawkes still perched on his shoulder, the phoenix's warmth a small comfort against the chill in his heart. "That went about as well as could be expected," Salazar murmured once they were clear of Dumbledore's quarters. "He's hiding things," Rowena said. "More than what he told us." "Of course he is. The question is whether those secrets will become problems." "They will. They always do." The great hall was empty when they passed through it, but Harry felt the castle's attention on them, a presence watching, evaluating, welcoming. Portraits tracked their movement. Suits of armor seemed to stand a little straighter as they passed. "The castle recognizes you," Godric said, not to Harry but to his fellow founders. "It knows we're back. It feels different than it did." Helga ran her hand along a stone wall. "Tired, somehow. Like it's been carrying weight for too long. 1,000 years of students and teachers and magic, all layered on top of each other." Rowena's voice was thoughtful. "The castle absorbs everything. It remembers everything. That's a lot of memory." They exited through a side door, emerging into the grounds. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The lake glittered in the fading light. "It's beautiful," Harry said quietly. "It is." Helga smiled at him. "And it's yours, Harry. Your legacy. Your heritage. Whatever else happens, remember that. This place was built for students like you, students who needed somewhere to learn and grow and become who they were meant to be. I still don't know who that is. You will. That's what Hogwarts is for." They walked back to Hogsmeade in the gathering dark, and from there, Opera to the portable manor. Home, for now. Harry lay in his bed that night, staring at the ceiling, processing everything he'd learned. His parents, murdered by a Dark Lord. A prophecy marking him for either glory or death. A piece of that same Dark Lord lodged in his skull. And underneath all of it, the ancient evil he'd sensed in his dream. Malachar, waiting in the darkness beneath the castle. It was too much. It should have been too much. But somehow, Harry found he wasn't afraid. Anxious, yes. Overwhelmed, certainly. But not afraid. Because he wasn't alone anymore. He had the founders. He had Fawkes, who had refused to leave his shoulder all day. He had the beginning of a plan and the start of real training. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a fierce determination was growing. Voldemort had killed his parents. Dumbledore had left him to rot. The wizarding world had celebrated his survival while ignoring his suffering. They'd all underestimated him. They'd all assumed he'd be grateful, malleable, easy to control. They were wrong. Harry Potter was going to be extraordinary. Not because of a prophecy. Not because of some ancient pact. But because he'd chosen to be. The darkness could come. Let it come. He'd be ready. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, The Train and the Choices. August passed in a blur of training, lessons, and preparation. Harry's days fell into a rhythm that would have seemed insane a month ago but now felt almost normal. Mornings began with physical conditioning, Godric's insistence, followed by a clemency practice with Salazar. Afternoons were devoted to magical theory with Rowena and practical spellwork once Harry finally received his wand. Evenings belonged to Helga, who taught him everything from basic healing magic to the subtle art of reading people. The wand had been an adventure in itself. Ollivander's shop in Diagon Alley was narrow and dusty, packed floor to ceiling with boxes that seemed to watch visitors with hostile intent. The wand maker himself was ancient and unsettling, with pale eyes that saw too much. "Ah," he'd breathe when Harry entered, flanked by 4 glamoured founders. "I wondered when I'd be seeing you, Mr. Potter. It seems only yesterday your mother was in here, buying her first wand. Willow. 10¼ inches. Excellent for charm work." He'd produced wand after wand, each one failing spectacularly when Harry tried it. Sparks flew. Boxes tumbled. At one point, a small fire broke out. "Tricky customer," Ollivander had murmured, clearly delighted. "Not to worry, the wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter. We'll find your match." The match, when it came, had made Ollivander go very still. "Curious," he'd whispered. "Very curious." "What's curious?" Harry had asked, feeling the warmth of the holly wand spreading through his fingers like coming home. "The phoenix whose tail feather resides in your wand gave another feather. Just one other. It is curious that you should be destined for this wand, when its brother gave you that scar." Harry had looked at the wand in his hand, 11 inches, holly, with a core of phoenix feather, and felt something complicated settle in his chest. "The wand that killed my parents. The wand that failed to kill you." Ollivander's eyes had glittered. "I think we must expect great things from you, Mr. Potter. After all, he who must not be named did great things." Terrible, yes, but great. The founders had bundled Harry out of the shop before he could respond to that particular observation. "Brother wands," Salazar had muttered later, examining Harry's new wand with professional interest. "That's going to complicate things if you ever face Voldemort directly." "Why?" "Brother wands can't be used against each other effectively. They'll recognize each other, create a kind of magical feedback loop." Salazar had handed the wand back. "We'll have to find workarounds. Wandless magic, perhaps. Or a secondary wand." Learning to actually use the wand had been another challenge. Harry's magic was strong, stronger than any of the founders had expected, but wild. Unpredictable. It wanted to surge and crash like a storm rather than flow in controlled channels. "You've been suppressing yourself for years," Rowena had explained after one particularly explosive practice session. "Your magic has been building up pressure with no release. Now that you're finally using it, it's all trying to come out at once. How do I control it?" "Practice. Meditation. Time." She'd smiled slightly. "And the occasional explosion, until you find your equilibrium." By the end of August, Harry could cast basic spells reliably, Lumos, Wingardium Leviosa, Alohomora, and a handful of others. More importantly, he could feel his magic now, could sense its currents and eddies, could sometimes predict when it was about to spike beyond his control. "You're making remarkable progress," Helga told him one evening, watching him successfully levitate a feather for the 20th consecutive time. "Most students take months to reach this level of consistency. I have good teachers. You have good instincts. The teachers just help you trust them. The occlumency had progressed too, though more slowly. Harry could maintain his shields against Salazar's probing for several minutes now, and could project false memories convincingly enough to fool a casual examination. The deeper techniques, hiding specific memories, creating layered defenses, detecting intrusion attempts, would take longer. Your mind is naturally resilient, Salazar had observed. The years of abuse taught you to compartmentalize, to hide your true feelings behind masks. We're just formalizing what you already knew. Turning trauma into technique. If you want to be cynical about it. Salazar's lip had twitched. I prefer to think of it as reclaiming your pain. Making it serve you rather than define you. The nights were harder. Malachar came to Harry in dreams at least twice a week, despite the occlumency training. The ancient